seen anybody in person, not related to them. Yeah. They're going to that big office building we got, and about 3 other people. I didn't even know it. But, on the positive side, I learned how to use the laminator. All by myself. I don't need the admin assistant.
Okay, now I'm hot. All right, now we can meet. We got everything on YouTube, everything straightened out. Yeah, I'll be honest, in preparation for our first in-person meeting in 2 years, I really intended to sit down and write a solid opening today. Like I really wanted to knock it out of the park. Time got away from me, and I even brought some stuff. I had found something in the Federalist Papers #1 that I was going to pull out and quote, and I just, the whole relevance of it has gotten away from me today, and I apologize. But the important thing is that we're here now, and we are able to meet together and talk about the important issues that face Savannah Riverside, get our citizen input together. We actually have somebody here in the room who has been doing that for quite a while, Marilyn Parson. I'm calling you out. She was chair of the CAB at one point in time, and I've seen many of her years of meetings together. Glad to see her again in person as well as everybody else. Thank you for attending today, and I'm so happy that we can be here together. We have a pretty interesting meeting for the day. We're going to open up with Greg giving us an update of a few of the issues that have gone on. You've been to a couple of chairs meetings, at least virtually, that I'm sure you'd like to tell some folks about. We've got a recommendation report to talk about, a stakeholder survey. This was a pretty thorough survey that was done at the behest of the CAB. You guys asked the department to go out into the community and see what they thought, see how they're learning about the site, and we've got the results of that. We'll take a break after that because that's a lot of slides and we'll probably need a minute to stretch our legs. We'll go into some major accomplishments. So this is something that I'm really proud that we're going to be able to do. We've got some important figures from all over the site who are going to come in and give you an update on the major things that have happened since you last met in person. So make sure you quiz them thoroughly. Make sure you understand. I know that you've seen the press releases. You've seen the news clips that have gone out. We've gotten some updates in our virtual meetings over the past year and a half or so. But this is a great time because they're going to be here and you can ask them all the questions that you've probably been dying to ask them over time. Then we've got some charges from the chairs meeting that we need to talk about. Craig, I'm sure, will have a lot to share about those and the work that went into it. And then we'll have just a fun little election at the end. We'll find out who our vice chair is going to be and who our chair is going to be for the next couple of years. And we're going to end for the day. And we're going to go into it tomorrow. Any questions about the agenda that we have? Seeing none. Greg, would you mind giving us a brief update about what's been going on?
I will do my best. And I'm ashamed now, James, the Federalist Papers, and you could have told me, and I maybe could have at least looked for something, but I will.
I even brought it. Like I had it ready to go. It just time got away from me today, and I wasn't able to do it.
That's all right. Well, we'll look forward to that, possibly tomorrow or at the next meeting, next in-person meeting. So that sounds like a good way to go.
Yeah, we might do it the next in-person meeting. I heard they got some great brisket tacos over here, so that might be what I do tonight.
There you go. All right. Greetings, CAB members, and thank you for being here. I'm glad to see everyone in person for the first time in well over a year. Thank you, James and CAB staff, for making this possible, and DOE and other state and federal agency staff for being here. In particular, I'd like to thank James and his team for keeping us going during a pandemic, as well as despite the substantial bureaucratic obstacles that we faced. There was a great deal of uncertainty, and James and his team handled it with persistence and professionalism. I'd also like to thank my fellow CAB members for hanging in there with the CAB during a difficult time. You responded when called upon during this uncertain period. It would have been easy to give up and just fade away, but you didn't. Thank you. We have a nice, as James mentioned, we have a nice meeting agenda for today. We got our normal agency updates, followed by a report on the stakeholder survey that was conducted in response to our recommendation. It seems It uncovered some important information, as well as raised some interesting questions. Possibly as importantly, it provides a valid and reliable model for other CABs that may want to assess their own community outreach efforts. As we'll see when we address Chair's recommendation number 1, that's a very viable issue, as previous survey efforts have not proven effective. We'll also have a catch-up report on what's happened at the site since our last in-person meeting. From what I can tell, a lot has happened, but I'll certainly leave that reporting up to Mike Budney, as well as leadership at SRNS, SRR, and the National Lab. I thank them, though, for taking their time for being with us today. The National Chairs Committee has been busy, as James suggested, and the SRS CAB contributed to that work. I will actually spare you a lot of the details. I planned on doing that, but we have a lot of other things going on, so I'll spare you some of those details, but we are going to talk about them later today when we talk about the charges. We'll next address those recommendations regarding site outreach, charge 1, long-term planning, charge 2, and the recommendation that originated with us regarding revising the membership appointment process. We'll end the day with officer elections for chair and vice chair. We do have a contested election for vice chair, which is, to me, as a political scientist, is a good indication of a healthy organization. I'd like to thank Candace and Charles for putting themselves forward to run for this position. Doing that is not easy, and I appreciate them both for doing it and wish them both good luck. With that, I'll end. I thank you all for your support of the CAB, and I look forward to the good work we're going to do today, tomorrow. Thank you.
Thanks, Greg. Any questions for Greg? Too many questions about the chairs, you might jump the gun before we get to the actual charges, but just in case, I always like to ask. All right. Something else I should also mention that I forgot to is you may have noticed there is a second screen behind me, and it's quite large. It's our Teams meeting. We have a hybrid meeting going on today. So there'll be a couple of folks that are joining us online through Teams that may need to participate. They weren't able to travel with us today. They'll be online. Just want to let you know that we're going to have our presenters here as best we can for everybody. Okay. Up next, as Greg mentioned, and I didn't when I went over the agenda, is the agency updates. Mike, are you ready to go through yours today?
I'm ready, yeah.
All right, let's do it.
All right. Okay, well, great to be here in person. Welcome, everybody. Go ahead and give an agency update. I do have to apologize right up front at 3:30. I got to take another phone, or actually, I'm sharing a phone call at 3:30. I have to do for a few minutes. But other than that, I didn't really think I wasn't interested in what was going on. I couldn't conflict that one. Okay, we'll start right out with the status we are on a COVID response. The President has an executive order mandates vaccines for federal employees and all our contractors. So deadlines vary a little bit depending on the contractor, but this is what we have right now. Federal employees are required to be fully vaccinated by November 22nd, and all our federal contractors by, I think I moved this to January 4th. I think I changed the date. But we've already modified all our contractors' contracts to put that executive order in place, and they're well on their way to meeting that requirement already. And they have their own individual deadlines that they've set to meet that requirement. Obviously, health and safety of our workforce is our number one concern, and our contractors are doing a superb job of meeting those requirements. The good news is the CSRA numbers are coming down. Last I checked them over the weekend, we were down at 52 per 100,000 over 7 days. That number, of course, changes on a daily basis, but that's been a pretty steady downward trend, so that's good news there. But we have had a number of folks come down with the virus on the site, and unfortunately, a few folks actually passed away as a result. So we do take it very seriously and continue to do so and follow the COVID protocols. The good news is, for the first time in some time, we've got no one in the hospital from the site employees, so another good trend there. So most of our contractors have a November 30th deadline for their folks to get vaccinated. So it's well inside the date that's required by presidential mandate for still are offering the Pfizer vaccine on site, and we have been providing boosters to those who are eligible to get boosters on site. As you might expect, we do have a few employees who have decided to either resign or retire rather than get the vaccine, but very small number compared to the population. And all the contractors have taken a hard look at possible impacts, and we don't see that we're going to have any operational impacts as a result of the small number of folks that we got that decided not to take the vaccine. We don't have a return to work plan yet or a date set certain on when we might, I shouldn't say return to work, everybody's still working. Return to the physical workplace. We don't have that set yet. So stand by for that information. That plan has been worked primarily at headquarters, and then we'll comply with whatever direction we get from them. Okay, moving on to contracts. In June, DOE reaffirmed the award of the security service contract, and shortly thereafter, Centerra filed a protest, and we're working on corrective action based on our protest. More to follow on that contract as we sort out those issues. The integrated mission completion contract, on October 27th, DOE announced the selection of Savannah River Mission Completion LLC out of Lynchburg, Virginia, and that contract potentially is going to allow us to complete the vast majority or perhaps all of the liquid waste mission under this next contract. It has an ordering period of 10 years and a potential performance period of 15. So that could get us all the way through the liquid waste on this one final contract. The scope includes all the tank farm operations, DWPF, SWPF, all our vitrification of high-level glass or high-level waste, the glass storage facilities. So it'll encompass the whole project. And it's being done in what we call an in-state contracting model, where we set up various task orders. Instead of just one big contract, we'll establish various task orders that allow us to narrow our focus, get some better financial estimates for the work we're doing, and reward the contractor for actually completing sections of the mission until we get it all done. SRS Management Operating Acquisition, on November 9th, DOE announced an indefinite delay to the final request for proposal for the Savannah Riverside Management and Operations Acquisition. DOE took this action to re-examine the RFP to ensure it provides for the best possible mission execution value for the taxpayer, as the National Nuclear Security Administration has committed to increasing its scope of work at Savannah River, including the full execution of the two-site pit production strategy and construction of the Savannah River plutonium processing facility. So I'm sure there'll be more to follow on that. I believe the announcement also stated that a contract extension will be announced later in a separate announcement. Still working hard on the Advanced Manufacturing Collaborative, which we're very excited about. As you know, in April, we awarded the contract to Northwind Construction Services, and it's going to be built on the University of South Carolina Aiken campus. We should be getting the 35% design shortly, and once we get that, then we'll go out with the task order to do the final design, and hopefully get enough of a firm schedule that we can figure out when the groundbreaking ought to be. So we'll let you know on that as soon as we have it. Moving on to budget. Budget looks pretty good. Both the House and Senate marks that we've seen so far are very much in line with the President's budget requests, some minor variations. The House and Senate have both provided funds for PIL, so that's all good news. So we think we'll be in good shape there, and this will be the first year that we, if it's signed into law as it currently exists, then it would be the first year we actually direct fund the legacy pension, which is a great help to us. It really makes the budget easier to understand where the money's being spent on operations and what's being spent on pension. So that'd be a good move there. Moving on to operational progress and achievements. H. Canyon resumed operations last month after completing their planned fall outage and has initiated fiscal year '22 processing of material test reactor and high flux isotope reactor spent fuels. L area continues to receive spent nuclear fuel from both foreign and domestic research reactors and stores that in L Basin until it gets processed in the canyon. And K area continues with 4-shift plutonium downblend operations to prepare material for shipment to WIC. We're still working building 235F deactivation activities. That schedule continues to firm up. We hope to be able to complete the activation in late calendar year '22, and as funding becomes available, get on with full D&D of that facility as we get those plans approved. FH Lab has initiated the activation activities. We've essentially moved all the services, analytical service to SRNL to save cost, allow us to shut down FH Lab and save a bunch of surveillance and maintenance costs over there. And true shipments, we've made, I'm not sure if we've actually made any true shipments this year. I don't think that does. We think we're going to get some done, but we haven't made any yet. So
2 this week.
but we're in good shape on
2 this week.
true shipments. And liquid waste, salt waste processing facility, since beginning hot commissioning last October, so basically a year ago, we've processed 2.38 million gallons of salt waste through SWPF. Still working through some operational issues there as we learn how to operate this new plant. But the basic process has proved to work well. The contractors do a phenomenal job of decontaminating that salt solution. So good progress on SWPF. And SRR has modified tank 42, so now they have 3 tanks to serve as salt waste blend tanks to prepare feed for SWPF, and that's required. We needed those 3 blend tanks to be able to prepare sufficient volume of feed to meet the flow rate through SWPF. So it was a great achievement by SRR. In Saltstone, over 3.1 million gallons of decontaminated salt solution is transferred to the Saltstone production facility for permanent disposal of SDUs. That's certainly a record. And then if you combine those 3.1 million gallons of decontaminated salt solution with Saltstone grout components, that results in 5.5 million gallons of saltstone produced. So that's about 20% of the volume of SDU 6, which is the one that we're filling at the moment. We also, I love this, we're also now making cement-free grout. So we use just slag and fly ash. And the lab, you can ask me any questions you want about this later, about how you can make cement with no cement. But we're doing it over there, which is a great achievement because it really allows you to increase the capacity of the saltstone production facility, because you only got 4 silos over there to hold slag and fly ash, and one of them used to hold cement. So you have 4 silos, 3, but now we have 4 silos and we only have 2 components. So now you can significantly increase the rate at which you can make saltstone over there. We take that saltstone, we put it in the saltstone disposal units, those 370-foot diameter, 42-foot high, 35 million gallon concrete tanks that we're building over there. We have had great support from Congress in the budget on this. In large respect, I think in response to the phenomenal job the DOE and SRR team has done in building these things, making each one, if you constant your dollars, they're making each one cheaper than they did the previous one. They're getting them all done ahead of schedule, low cost. 7's done and authorized for use. 6, as I said, we're using. 8, if you were to go out there and look at it, it looks essentially complete. But all the concrete's in place, walls, the roof is on. Now we've got to add the balance plant to that. Number 9, the floor is about, I think, 85% done. So, and we have authority to go ahead and start 10, 11, 12 also. So that program is really moving along very well. And our contractors, SRR and the DN Tanks produces the tanks, all do a great job out there. On the Defense Waste Processing Facility, we poured 59 canisters in FY21, and we've done 6 already in FY22. DWPF is a complex piece of machinery, and the contractor is doing a great job of keeping all those pieces working. As we've talked before, we can't have any single component go down into the waste mission. It affects all the other ones that are requirements. So it takes a lot of effort to keep all the things in sync. The other great thing that has occurred is SR figured out how to double stack the canisters that we put in the glass-based storage buildings. So we don't have to build a third glass-based storage. We'll be able to use glass. We've been double stacking the glass-based storage building 1. We'll be able to do it in glass-based storage building 2. And then more than accounts for the capacity we need for all the canisters we expect to produce from all our operations. Tank preparation for waste removal. In FY21, design installation of waste retrieval equipment and infrastructure was performed on 15 salt and sludge tanks and FNH tank farms. We used to do 3 or 4 tanks at a time. So this is a big step increase in order to meet the process of material to be able to feed SWPF and increase the rate at which we execute this mission. So in this year, we'll continue to work on those tanks as we support feed preparation needed by the rest of the facility. 10 tanks are currently undergoing preparation activities, and we use those to do salt dissolution and removal of compile qualified batches. And then 5 additional tanks are undergoing preparation activities for sludge removal. And we'll start salt dissolution on 2 of the salt tanks in support of SWPF feed preparation, and 2 of the sludge tanks to start sludge removal to feed at DWPF. And as you know, we've talked many times, it's critical to work these things in advance. It takes about 3 years to get any single tank ready for either the salt batch or a sludge batch to move the material. We are still using Ticker. We finished the process of the material in tank 10 with Ticker. And now we're moving material from tank 9 to tank 10 and then through Ticker. So we're essentially onto our second tank with the tank closure season removal system. And then we did, for the first time in some time, actually close some of the tank farm facilities by conducting the closure of F-tank farm diversion boxes 5 and 6. These are large boxes on the tank farm, big concrete structures in which all the valve mechanisms that we use to move material around the tank farms are located. And so we completed all the regulatory documentation required to proceed with the operational closure in FY22 to meet our federal facilities agreement commitment for closure as part of the approved minor modification for the 2019 suspension agreement. And the closure of these ancillary facilities is the first closure we've done in liquid waste since tanks 16 and 12 were closed in 2015 and 2016 respectively. Soil and water cleanup and infrastructure. So at the end of FY21, we completed all 71 of our federal facility agreement regulatory enforceable milestones on schedule or ahead of schedule, and maintain continued compliance with over 500 environmental permits. We did receive regulatory approval for a final remedial record decision for the lower 3 runs integrator applicable unit. It's a 30-mile long stream with 9 miles of canals and 3 cooler ponds on the site. We completed D&D of 9 D-area buildings and the 690N Ford building, including the cap installation. Issued the D-area ash basins rod for 4 waste units. Received 2021 Sustainability Award honorable mention for the permeable reactive buried at P ground, or P area reactor groundwater. This is where we put the iron filings in the ground to capture the effluent coming out of that old reactor. The iron filings are made of ground up engines. So it's like a machine that grounds up the engine block of your car, but makes small iron filings out of it. We conducted the first virtual 5-year remedy review inspection for waste units with engineered cover systems with the regulators using drones and HD video imaging. Another thing you might want to ask Vicky about, because his team has pioneered all the drill work on the site. So it saves a lot of time. I mean, you got these huge areas out there with covers on them, gives us a good electronic record of what everything looks like, that you can compare the next time you go to do that, and it's not just a matter of folks walking around looking at the little bit of the space you can see in the context. You've got a good picture of the whole area. Completed 484-17D cold storage area response action. We mixed 12 acres of low pH soil, which has acidified after 60 years of cold storage, to a 4-foot depth with pulverized limestone to buffer acidity and improve groundwater. So if you'd seen it before, there was actually no life out there. It's like a moonscape. If you go out there today, plants are growing again. So I guess we get the pH. I don't know if you can plant your roses out there, but the pH is pretty good for whatever native plants there are. They're growing out there. So things haven't slowed down in the first weeks of FY22. We've submitted all FY22 federal FY22 federal facility agreement milestones to date on or ahead of schedule. The site released the 2020 annual site environmental report, ASHA report, which documents site environmental data. And that's available to the public online. And I think we're supposed to have a presentation on that this meeting too, right? At the request of the local community adjacent to the Savannah River site, South Carolina DHEC held a public hearing on October 7th on the RCRA hazardous and mixed waste permit renewal as part of the permit renewal process. They hosted a virtual meeting, present a summary of the permit, which includes groundwater contamination cleanup in A and M and F and H areas, and the mixed waste management facility as well as H areas solvent storage tank closure. Public was encouraged to make oral comments, but none were received during the hearing, and that public comment period closed October 22nd. And that concludes my remarks. Subject to any questions you might have.
Jim, let's start it off.
Mike, could you elaborate just a little bit on the status of glove boxes and the down blending operation in the K area?
We have the one glove box that we've always had, the KISS, the K-Area interim storage glove box. It's staffed up now, so we do 24/7 operations out there. And then NNSA has a project to install 3 more glove boxes out there. And that's what I said, but it's not my project per se, so I don't really want to go into further details on that, but it seems to be tracking along pretty well. Yeah.
And I assume you're getting a fair amount of pressure still on moving plutonium out of South Carolina.
Well, there's a schedule set for it. It's no new pressure or anything. Schedule, I mean, really was that settlement agreement that attached the schedule, so we're tracking on that.
Okay, thank you.
On that schedule.
Any other questions from around the table? Charles? We'll just go down the road.
Thanks for that report. One question on SWF.
Yeah.
Solid
Yep.
Waste. Yeah. All the acronyms get me sometimes. There was a construction slowdown with the valves. The valves were a problem,
Right.
and the contractor supposedly fixed them. Have you had any problems with that since you?
None whatsoever. Yeah, no, it was the right call. I decided that we had to change out those cards that were operating those valves on. It just didn't compute that you had to start up a facility with those cards in there. So we did that, and they're working great.
And just a quick offer, you said you had a machine to grind up engine blocks.
I did not. I said the contractor who installed that barrier ground up the engine blocks.
I have lots of farm equipment, probably need to get off the farm.
We can get you a number for those folks.
There's a lot of money in that scrap metal you leaving behind. Any other questions from around the table? DeAndre, we are just going right now.
About the issues about the double stacking canisters.
Yeah.
So when you talked about them being double stacked, what is the process? Because is it being the ones that's below, are they being moved to the top and the older ones? Or is it just being stacked on top?
They're just being stacked on top. That when the buildings were originally constructed, the thought was there could be some heat developed in those canisters, so they had only designed it for one canister per silo. It's not a silo above ground, they're below ground, that grade. But after some time in the program, we realized that we're really not seeing any heat build up, and it was perfectly okay to, if you could get two in. The two glassware storage buildings are designed slightly differently. So the way we reconfigured glassware storage building number one to stack them on top didn't work for number two. The Reader's Digest versions, we had to develop a different cap to put on in glassware storage building number two than we were able to use in glassware storage number one. And once they did that, because you gotta have that right cap on there and make sure you don't have any radiation streaming out of these radioactive cylinders from that. And once they figured that out, the floors were different, and you had to make sure it was safe to drive the transporter across. So it was really a mechanical issue of just figuring out how to get the cap in there and make sure it was the right strength to support the transporter.
Is the depth different for each one, or is it the same depth as far as each canister? When you talk
All the
about-
canisters are the same.
Okay.
Yeah, all the canisters are exactly the same size. Yep.
Greg? You're just next. We were going down the row, so. Phyllis, do you have any questions for Mr. Button? All right, any other questions from anybody else around the table? Y'all got him here. Right here in front of us for real this time. That was it? Not
We
bad.
can take more later, pick them up later.
Absolutely, we can always come back around to it. I want to take a minute and thank Mike for your support in hosting this meeting in person. Be honest, folks, if y'all didn't know, Delisa and I at orientation every year, we tell everybody who comes in, all new members come in, that site management really is dedicated to the advisory board process. And they want to see your input. And if the proof is anything I can show you, it's the fact that we are here today in this meeting, because Mike could have very easily said, no, let's wait. But instead he said, no, it's important that we get together, that we move forward, that we keep working these issues. And I just thank you, sir. We do sincerely appreciate it. John, you ready for your update?
Sure. And yes, I'm very happy to be here as well. As I told some of you, didn't get approval until Friday. We have a lot of travel restrictions as well. It's easier to get to the site for some field oversight than to come to, but hopefully it'll be easier in the future. Some of you may or may not know, the EPA regional offices, we have 10, like a lot of federal agencies, unlike DOE, their sites. So most regions have their own political appointee at the top, ours a regional administrator. We've had John Blevins acting, some of you may know, since the change of administration, and most regions have gotten a new RA by now. It's usually far down the line for most of the priorities of a new incoming administration, but we were told in a all-hands meeting a couple weeks ago that ours should be any week now. I think it's just going through the final process for our new regional administrator. Also, we have not given we'll start a 45-day process that we were going to start in September. That got postponed thanks to the Delta virus. So again, we're obviously a federal agency, and our federal contractors all have to be vaccinated this month. So we expect that 45-day notice hopefully to come out to start phasing in. We're hoping maybe early December, so we're thinking maybe late January, early February, hopefully. some of you may know the others that work with me, certainly don't do this alone. I've been the FFA project manager for a little over 3 years now, and most of you know Rob Pope. Many years before that, he's still very active. In fact, he's heading up our lower 3 runs, one of our big milestone targets coming up for the record decision signature. I think the target was January. We're a couple months ahead of schedule. We're getting ready to brief our upper management. We already just scheduled that today for the end of the month. It should get the signature at that time. So Rob Pope, Deidre Lloyd, Craig Van Trees, Jennifer Tufts, and Kyle Briner, community coordinators, for those who don't know. And it was a big plus for us. I know it's minor compared to your big contract, but Tech Law has always been our oversight contract for a lot of federal facility regions for either DOD or DOE work, and they've been one of our primary contract for Savannah River, Oak Ridge, and Paducah work for most of the last 10 years, and we knew the new contract was coming in September 30th, and we were very happy to see that they got the renewed contract. Well, there was a little transition time. Some of our reviews have gotten a little bit delayed, but they're on board now, and again, they'll be involved in, again, some of you see them in some of our oversight on the field work, and obviously reviewing a lot of our documents, deliverables. I know Jim Folk had recently sent emails responding to Susan and I that now with the new contract, obviously we're hoping to get one of our biggest priorities. I know it's obviously DOE in South Carolina is the high-level waste, getting those milestones back on target. Those are huge for us as well as they are for them. So we expect that hopefully the upcoming year. I mentioned lower 3 runs. That's again a big plus for us. The 235F, I see there's a talk tomorrow. That's very high priority for EPA as well, and we're happy to see that moving along. Our latest 5-year review, some of you are familiar with those. We have so many, Savannah River, we actually have one every year. This one that South Carolina and DOE have already approved, and I'm getting ready to route for our final signature. We kind of have to time it at the end of the calendar year. It's on the engineered cover system remedies. And yeah, last February, where we're normally out there walking down all these sites with COVID restrictions, we were very happy to get the drone surveys for a lot of these sites that are sometimes quite large. And we often can't get to see all parts of a site. So that's very helpful. And I think we're going to have a combination of that for this upcoming one in February, walking down some of the sites as well as the drone surveys. We appreciate that. So I think that's all I have. Thank you.
Any questions for EPA? Greg?
Hi, John. Thank you for that, for the update. I'm really interested in the drones and how that's changed a lot of protocols and all kinds of businesses. Can you talk a little bit more about how y'all are using drones? Has it changed a lot of what you do? Those sorts of things.
That's where I may have to get back to you, but I knew DOE had gotten approval for using drones 2 or 3 years ago. I want to say almost 3 years ago. EPA would be very helpful. A lot of our Superfund sites. Obviously, some of our Superfund sites are private sites, and maybe an acre, sometimes as big as a McDonald's parking lot, or sometimes 300 square miles like Savannah River. So obviously, we're not the lead for federal facilities, but my point is we have not given permission to use drones until literally, I think, a little bit over a year ago. We finally got some guidance out of headquarters that gave the ways we can do or not do it. So I think that's been very helpful, especially for public meetings, to show that you can see what's going on the site, see all the signs. So yeah, we recently had some headquarters guidance on exactly how we're allowed to do those and when and where. But specifically, we haven't done it in my area. I think, in fact, we have they used to be out of Cincinnati, now out of Dallas. We call it the Aspect plane that was in the past used for chemicals and photos. Now it has radiation instruments on it. It can be very high resolution, especially for big gamma like cesium 137 or radium 226, those kind of things. And recently, labs have added drones to that. So obviously, for emergency, we're working hand on nuclear accident, for example, working with the Department of Energy and NRC, depending on who it is and what it is. So everyone's kind of going to drones for emergency use as well. I think our labs are developing that technology.
Is it fairly easy to implement? So in other words, can you buy as many drones as you want? Is it easy to get people trained to operate them? No. I'm seeing somebody shake their head no.
You have to have a pilot's license to be able to.
Okay. That's what I wondered.
Yeah, so I think right now, at least for the emergency part, we're not as huge as Pee-wee's, Las Vegas, and other places where they have their helicopters and other things. So we know our one that has the airplane, they've got permission to use drones, and they may be the only one right now. But they work hand in hand with our radiation lab in Montgomery to develop all the, at least for radiation uses, what kind of devices you can actually put on the drone. But for pictures, I still think, yeah, it's probably still restrictive of who's allowed to use it when and where.
Thank you so much.
Okay. Any other questions for EPA? Okay. Dia, you ready? Susan? I remembered your name. I just know which one of the two of you was going to go first. I know it's usually you. Just don't like to assume.
Thank you. Hi, everybody. It's great to see you. I've got just a few updates. John went through a bunch of them already, so I won't go through those points again. Thank you, John. On the FFA program, he mentioned the Lower Three Runs record decision, so that'll be coming out and available for public review soon. But we did also have the stormwater outfall AO13 record of decision, and that was signed as of September 30th, so that one is available for public review if you'd like to look at that one. He mentioned the 5-year remedy review for engineered cover systems. That one will be signed soon. And then we're starting the 5-year review process for this will be the 6th 5-year remedy review for units with geosynthetic or stabilization or solidification cover systems. So you may recall that we broke up the 5-year reviews several years ago by type of remedy. So last year was the engineered cover systems, and this year will be the geosynthetic or stabilized sites. So that process will be starting. We'll be doing our walk down sometime in probably the early winter time. This is where the drone usage or the in-person site visit will be combined. Again, last year we did the drones, and that was really helpful. So this year, the question came up, would we like to continue with doing the drone footage or have an in-person walk down? And really having the availability to do both is much more conducive to giving us some extra information. You know, we can look at the bird's eye view of the site and see different things than we would have necessarily just walking the site. As you can imagine, there's a lot of land to walk over at SRS, and so we can't see everything when we're walking, but you can certainly see a lot with the drone. So we'll be using both of those. And you guys were asking about the drones. South Carolina does have a drone program as well, and we've been using those at a lot of sites. We don't use them at SRS, but a lot of our environmental facilities, they're, you know, whether it's looking at a landfill or I was out last week at an old mill that's abandoned, and we did some drone footage of that facility. So it's a really helpful way to get a different perspective and look for some different things that might be of interest when you're cleaning up the site. Let's see what else we have. Okay, so the integrated mission completion contract was mentioned. We were very excited to hear about that award at the end of October. This is great news for us because that means we can start the negotiation processes for the liquid waste milestones. So the goal from our suspension agreement that we signed a few years ago was that we would start that discussion, that negotiation of those milestones once this contract had been awarded and the notice to proceed issued. So there are a few more things that the site needs to do as far as getting that contract awarded. I know they need to get through potential protest period. But once that notice to proceed is issued, then we can really get down to it and start having the negotiation meetings. So the goal would be for us to agree to new milestones by the end of FY22. So it's gonna be a few months process, and there'll be opportunities for public input throughout that process. Of course, we were also glad to see the grouting that Mike had mentioned, the F diversion boxes 5 and 6, that work is underway. That was part of that suspension agreement work, and that's moving along very well. And then I've got one update from the RECRA program. There was the public meeting that was mentioned for the draft hazardous and mixed waste permit. That was the end of October, or excuse me, it was in October. And then the end of October was the public comment period ended. And at this point, the department is reviewing those comments and writing responses. So they hope to issue the permit by the end of the month, end of November. So that's all from me. I guess I'll take questions and then Grace Ann. Okay.
Any questions for Susan? DeAndre?
Susan, thank you for the update. Just was curious, just for knowledge information, you talked about the drone program. Is that program in-house or are you partnering with another agency to be able to provide that service?
It's in-house.
In-house?
Yep.
Okay. Just like to have a conversation with you offline just to get more information. I'm out at Augusta Regional Airport, and there's a program that we are also already involved in that we want to see how we can better support our community in providing either more information or being able to partner in that as well. So thank you.
Okay, great, thank you.
Any other questions? Seeing none. Grace Ann?
Hi, everyone. I don't have as much as Susan, but I just wanted to let everyone know that we plan to have our 2020 ESOP annual report available by the end of this year. So when that does become available, I'll send James the link. He can send it out to everyone. And then we also are excited to announce that our ESOP video that we've been working on has been completed. So in the near future, we will have its debut. So that may be next year when we do our presentation or however James would like us to get the information out to you all. Thank you.
Any questions about that? All right. Very cool. Okay. Oh, up next is me. So before we go into the next bit, is there any other questions that maybe came up to your mind for anybody who's spoken so far, for Mike, John, Susan, or Grace Ann? Just want to give you the opportunity to hit them up one more time. Charles?
This is not a question, it's just a comment. I want to thank Mr. Bundy personally. I didn't know who made the decision for us to meet face-to-face again. Mike, if you made that decision, thank you for that. These face-to-face meetings are so much more helpful to us. This is kind of over our heads sometimes. And being here with DOE officials, with all of you folks, really helps. Thank you for making the decision to let us come back together.
Well, sure, yeah, but, I just do what Amy tells me. She said this is and we get great help from Ron Armando, who's our liaison up at headquarters, too, to help push our agenda up there. So, yeah, we're a little tired of Zoom and
Whoever's
WebEx.
involved, thank you to all of you for allowing us to come back together.
Thank you. All right, so up next is we're going to take a walk through the stakeholder survey report that we received. Some of you remember, the majority of you may remember that the last time we met in person in November 2019, there was a recommendation passed about asking the department to study how the community learns about Savannah River site. How do stakeholders learn about the site? What are their general feelings about it? Are they even aware that it exists? DOE accepted that recommendation and commissioned this survey that was done over the summer, and we got this report back from it. This is the unedited version of mostly the top line stuff that we've got. We do have county-specific data, but as you'll see as we walk through it, when you talk about some of the smaller numbers out of those things, like you can't really draw statistical significance for the results out of Allendale County. There just weren't enough people who responded out of Allendale. So while we do have that data, I want to caution using it to draw any kind of conclusions. This data is statistically significant out to the entire population that was surveyed, not individual counties, if that makes sense. Any questions about that before we go forward? Because I know it's probably been a while since some of us took a research methods class. Okay. Another thing I'm going to ask is that normally when we do presentations, I typically ask you to hold your questions until the end. I'm going to suspend that rule for this presentation because I feel like as we're going through it, not everything is going to get answered by a further slide. So let's get our questions out as we go through it, and hopefully as we address things, we'll figure things out together. That make sense? All right, so this was just the table of contents that we had. The background I already gave you. They put in the text of the CAB recommendation so that it provided a baseline reference for everything. They gave us some objectives, and I'll give you a chance to go back and read these on your own. I really want to get into the meat of the results itself. Distribution, we had a little over 1,600 respondents, 529 from Georgia, 1,098 from South Carolina. You can see the collection dates. We used an internet survey, or the contractor used an internet survey to collect the data. We did look for folks that were 18 and up. We weren't really trying to get the high school students and younger opinions. We were looking for folks who probably did have some exposure baseline to Savannah Riverside, and they had to live in one of these counties listed in Georgia or South Carolina. They gave another county for the survey. When they were taking it, would automatically kick them out and give them a very polite thank you. 95% confidence level that we were striving for and they were able to achieve, which I'm glad to see. Executive summary. So a lot of people really do seem to have what I would say, what we would like to see in terms of understanding Savannah Riverside. One of the interesting things is that when we go over to communications preferences, you'll see that far and away more people get their information from friends and family, so word of mouth, more so than any other media outlet that's going on. There were a few things that they did recommend right off the bat. One of the things was opt-in communication platform that they recommended. They thought that, and we've talked about that, that's something that's low-hanging fruit, and Amy, you can jump in anytime. We've, in our discussions, maybe having an email sign up at the bottom of srs.gov so that people can get the news clips. I mean, that would be a pretty straightforward thing to do, right? And something easy we could do. SRS familiarity and knowledge. So when you go and you look at Savannah Riverside, we've heard in public comments a lot of, sometimes people conflate Plant Vogel and Savannah Riverside. And so we asked the surveyors to tackle that specifically so that they could help us understand how much of that misconception exists. So one of the things they've asked is, how familiar are you with SRS? How familiar are you with Plant Vogel? And you can see the responses here. Majority of people are falling in that somewhat familiar to very familiar category. Because most of our sample size was in South Carolina, I think it makes sense that 45% had never even heard of Plant Vogel. Again, differences is observed in familiarity with Savannah Riverside. You can see how it breaks out. You've got the totals, breaks out by state, region, and then we looked at age group as well. So Gen Z, millennials, Gen X, boomers, and then people who are older than that. Some of the interesting things, there's a lot of somewhat familiar, kind of the older people get, they become more and more aware of SRS and what it is and what it does. And they hit that point. We also had breakdowns based on race and ethnicity, educational level. So I think maybe there might be some avenues for more targeted outreach efforts to try and position ourselves with those communities so that they understand what's in their own backyard. Let's see, the community has some knowledge of SRS. This was one of the more interesting. So we gave them this series of true-false questions as they were going through. And it was, the SRS has a long track record of being one of the safest major industrial sites in the world. Most people answered true to that. Responsible for disposition of nuclear materials, most gave the correct answer. There are some interesting things going on over here with location. Most people correctly identified that South Carolina was the, site's in the right place. Sorry. Words are hard today. And then we were also looking at who owns the SRS. So we gave them a couple of options, Department of Energy and Department of Defense. We kind of wanted to see how that broke down. You can see that 30% of the people surveyed answered true to both of that. So there might be some work that needs to go into just a little bit of making sure people understand who's responsible out there and who's taking care of the environment, public health and safety. Again, same thing down here. One of the big things we wanted to highlight was that one right there. That was a big response. That SRS and Plant Vogtle have the same mission. 52% of the people who are familiar with both answered yes, that they do. And that was a little bit shocking because you think that if they claim a familiarity with the site, that they would know that we're not producing electricity, that they don't have the same mission. So there's probably some efforts that could go into that. That misconception does exist in the community. Concerns, we showed them this, so most of you are probably familiar with this right here. That is from the SRS information packet. That's really the first page of it. We gave the respondents the opportunity to read that information and then ask them questions about it, about how familiar were they with it, had they seen it before, where did they hear this information. 1 in 4 respondents said that they had actually seen this before. Most people chose their info sources as other, and as you'll see later on, that was where you start getting into the friends and family bit, where you see a lot of people who are picking those. That is their preferred choice of receiving information. Top concerns, we saw a lot in the comments of people who said that they had no concerns at all. Other issues that were mentioned, some folks, there were some comments about safety concerns, and then some just about generally being informed. They didn't know how to gather more information about the site. So that was something that we were able to draw out and take a look at. Communication preferences. This was one of the targets of the original recommendation, was trying to gauge where do people learn about SRS, how do they get that information. 67% of the respondents said that they get their information about SRS from friends, families, and coworkers. That's wild. But it tracks with when you start looking at communication out there in the community and who do people trust, right? You trust somebody you know, that's a known quantity. So it makes sense that we would see that kind of number so high. Also pretty high is internet news and social media, television, and then we get into the lower radio, newspapers, something in the mail, and then they were given another chance box that they could check, but there was only 1% with that. Georgia breakdown for communication preferences. Again, you see fairly high word of mouth across the board, not just in the state itself, but all the way down. Burke County was a little bit of an outlier here because social media was such a high percentage for them in that area. South Carolina communications preferences is the same thing, so we've got the county breakdowns to the side. For most of the counties, it was word of mouth, although Jasper is a standout in that 94% of the respondents there chose TV. Again, this is an area where I want to highlight 94%, 16 people. So we really need to be looking at the top line numbers when we say that yeah, you're shaking your head, Jim. You're like, no, you can't draw any conclusions off of. Why even include that? Future SRS communication preferences, we asked them what would they like to see in the future. A lot of people responded with email and internet news. Some people are still standing by their friends, family, and coworkers, and that's okay. But a lot of them were referencing that desire to get communications via email, to see more information directly from the site, and then from internet news. There were some generational differences, although not a whole lot. I'll give you a chance to take a look at that as you go through. Email stood out for a lot of folks, especially younger populations. Newspapers is holding out for older folks in the community. Internet news and email still, though, is very important. I mean, I think that's just the broader area that a lot of people get their information from.
James, will you
Yes,
go
ma'am.
back to that slide and
Yeah.
read out the age groups under each of those,
Do I have to?
please?
Okay. Gen Z was coded as 18 to 24. Younger Gen Y was 25 to 29. Older Gen Y is 30 to 40. Gen X was 41 to 56. Boomers 57 to 75, and matures was 75 plus.
Thank you. I just needed to know where I was.
And do these designations come from some official government agency?
That's the thing, is that that's why we actually asked them to add the ages underneath with how they were coding it. Because as somebody who's 41, you can find places that put me in Gen X, older Gen Y, and I've seen some other generation that allegedly I belong into. So it gets a little hinky unless you actually have the code attached to it. That was the reason why. Demographics, just some plain demographic features about this. Again, 67% of the respondents came from South Carolina. 90% of them are residing in an urban county. This was just the county breakdown information, respondents for each one. Annual income, you can see the male-female breakdown, age groups, race, ethnicity, level of education. A lot of folks had some college or more, associate's, bachelor, some graduate degree. This was just to provide some background information on who was actually making up that sample that was polled. Again, census of sample levels. So this is for background information so that you can understand how this compares to the actual sample. Make sense?
Right.
So 68% is female in the census. Here it was 68% here, if that makes sense, right? So I just happened to pick the one that was exactly the same. That was one. And then, any questions about what we did and how we got here?
Yeah, James?
Yeah, Jim?
Yeah, question. How much of this data, background data, was census data, or did it actually come out of the internet?
It was, the only thing that was census data is gonna be this slide right here. Everything else came from the survey. Yep, came from responses. Charles, you're thinking about it, aren't you? Okay, what's up? You got something?
There was a slide, James, that it showed where we got our news and what we believe. I think it was Burke County had some astronomical amount from Facebook, social media.
Mm-hmm.
That concerns me.
It shouldn't.
I mean, we all know the accuracy of Facebook, but,
That notwithstanding, it shouldn't. I'll tell you why. In this particular case, if you look, the sample size out of Burke County was only 17. So 71% of 17 people in this one county
okay,
that
I missed that.
chose to respond. So that's why I not continuously, as often as I should have, you gotta look at that top line, that total number. So it's only, well, it's the 52%, so take from that what you will, out of the state of Georgia. So it's still high. It's still, a lot of people get their news from there. Now, what the survey doesn't do when we start getting down into the weeds of that is that friends and family sharing things on Facebook or other social media sites. Is it that they're following news pages? For all we know, they're checking the social media box, but what they're seeing is top line ads from the Aiken Chronicle, or the Aiken Standard, sorry, or the Augusta Chronicle. We don't know.
James, I'm sure you covered this, but how did you get the people who responded?
That was something that we left up to the contract company to do. They send out, and Greg can actually give a pretty good explanation about this because he's the one who taught me about it. But there's these companies that have people signed up willing to do surveys, and so they'll send it out to all these folks and try to get as many as they can.
Phil, the survey was fielded by a company called YouGov, and they do surveys all over the world. The way they do it is they basically enlist thousands and thousands and thousands of people in well, they called it a panel, and these people are people who've said they're willing to take surveys. And what they will do over time is they ask them a bunch of different surveys on a bunch of different topics. It just so happens that in our case they were asking about, or in this case they were asking about SRS. They pay them usually. It varies. I don't know if it's dramatically or not, but they pay them in things like could be magazine subscriptions. I think if they answer enough surveys over time, they might get paid actually, and they're willing to wait. They could actually get paid money. They do get compensated in some way, and that's how YouGov and these companies who do this sort of work engage their samples. They will also, for folks who don't have internet access, because they did do these surveys online, they will actually, if they select somebody into their sample and they don't have a computer or internet service, they'll actually provide it for them. So they're trying to get as close as they can to representative samples as possible. I think one of the problems that needs to be thought about a little bit in these terms is we need some, if possible, some weighting data from them. Because the real key in terms of representativeness, from my perspective, and somebody who does work on this sort of thing from time to time, is looking at that demographics versus census samples page. And if you look, for instance, the sample is pretty heavily female. And there are weights you could have applied to the results to get a little better idea on some of this, on some of these numbers.
That's what I was going to say, that the process you're talking about, it seems to me that automatically skews the numbers, because not just anybody first knows about wanting to do this.
Right.
And second, is willing to do it.
They claim that they can draw representative samples at the national level and lower levels. The problem is because I think, well, actually I know, they had so many counties that had to be covered, and there weren't enough funds there, although a lot of funds were dedicated to it. Basically, you needed probably 400 to 500 people in each county to get a representative sample. And still, depending on how close the responses were, you still may not have had enough sample to distinguish statistically between, whatever the answers were. So I think that's some of the problem you end up with some of these numbers. I think we do have to be careful. I can't see that real well. If it has less than, what's the smallest number up there, James?
Scranton
11?
County at 11. And that's why,
Yeah, I personally would not have broken that one out separately. For me, anything less than say 25 to 30, you're running a problem of getting something that's not really statistically well structured, and then it still may not be. I think this is, this was compared to something one of the other cabs had done, where they tried themselves to draw the sample. This is like light years better in terms of representativeness in the responses. I think it could be really good if we could get some weighting on it, and so that you can say, all right, so you can make the sample basically 50-50 male-female. And some of those things, if you look on that page, and I don't say a page number on it, but so if you look at, for instance, the Hispanic sample, it's about right. I think that the lines you want to look at are the, for instance, the census in South Carolina says about 6% of South Carolina population is Hispanic. Well, the sample is 7%, so I think that's that's pretty close. That's reasonably close. And the same thing in Georgia, it was 10 and 9. For the white respondents, you had in Georgia 60 versus 61, pretty darn close. In South Carolina, 69 versus 66. I think that's something that can be lived with, at least from my perspective. South Carolina, the black respondents were much closer, 27 versus 30. Off a little bit. In Georgia, 33 versus 38. The education component, it looks like it's okay in Georgia. It's off, I think, a fair amount in South Carolina. But I think a lot of this could be fixed with weighting. And typically, quite frankly, most of the surveys you see reported in the media and such, they wait. They don't, this is not an unusual problem to have, I guess is what I'm trying to say.
I was wondering about economics. I mean, how many people from Crossland Park would respond compared to Woodside,
Right,
for
right.
example?
Right. Well, and again, what these folks will do is if they draw somebody into a sample, if they need to, they, you know, and they don't have internet service or what they need, they will actually provide it for them. You know, so that's always a concern with these things. I think this is a very reasonable effort at this, and I think it gave some good information from my talks with James and Amy in terms of some of the things they've seen, you know, and what they can take and do with it.
Thank you. Anything else from around the table?
James, I was just interested on the generational differences in the preference page as we looked at by age group. Just interested to know why was there such a disparity between Gen Z and the younger Gen Y as far as the number of participants? Because it seemed like all the rest of them were outside of the mature season. It seemed to be very close in the number that were actually given opportunity to participate.
It really could be, like as Greg was saying, they send it out to these banks of people willing to take surveys. They may not have had an equal number of people that were that age that responded.
And the reason why I ask is because when you look at the chart, as you're in Gen Z, there's a great disparity between how they get their information as you move closer to Gen X. It starts to kind of almost even out to where the information dissemination is kind of getting very close to each other across the board, which is a replication of how information is received anyway from the age group.
And that was even one where, you know, I'll be honest, when we first got the survey report back and they had broken it out between a younger Gen Y and an older Gen Y, my first question was why? No pun intended. I mean, but why do that? What's the benefit in having that generation broken in half? I mean, 25 to 40, okay, I mean, that's a significant span compared to some of the others, but I mean, it's not an unreasonable span when you're talking about. So that's something that we probably need to research on the side. I'm sure there's probably something in the data literature, the social science literature about why we would care about that, but that was my first question. On that page, anyway. Greg?
I think this is really interesting. I've thought a little bit more. We talked a couple of times about how people get information about SRS from word of mouth, friends and family. And I've thought about that, and it always sort of struck me as odd. And I thought, well, maybe in a low information environment that makes sense. But I wonder, have y'all accounted for media coverage of SRS in general? Because if there's a lot of media coverage, you see what I'm saying? If they had media coverage, say in a very extreme case, there was something on SRS every single day in the media, you would find that instead of saying word of mouth, they probably would have said some sort of media effect. Did y'all?
I don't know that this data has the ability to do that.
But do you guys have it? Do you guys track media hits?
Yes.
So I'm wondering, I kind of figured you did, Amy.
We do.
Sorry. Did you kind of compare these and see? That might be worth something.
We can do that. I hadn't thought of it. but
Right,
we're
because
happy to-
that would make, it'd be interesting to know, and I don't think you can probably get it at this point, but if you ever do this again, to go back and see if there are differences in opinions between people who primarily get their SRS information from the media versus other sources.
Yeah,
I was just gonna say that because we kind of have the same challenges at the airport
Mhm.
where the media coverage differs from the standpoint of, let's just take radio for instance. We got news media radio that deals specifically with news, but you could be listening to a R&B station that wants to highlight something that's going on in the community, but don't have the substantial enough evidence to really be able to put it out. So that group will fall within the Gen Z and the younger Gen Y that may get misinformed information that now leads to it's being able to put your finger on exactly where that media coverage is coming from and how is it being disseminated as it's being put out as well. Because it's not just from news radio, it's from a gamut of just the radio period, because you have every pundit that wants to put out something as it relates to going on in the community from their own standpoint, not necessarily from a true factual based standpoint. Because that's something we deal with as well. So I would imagine that y'all have that.
I'm smiling because I'm getting text messages right now from the reporters who are watching this saying, Amy, why don't you get something in the paper every single day? So they're texting me right now. Thanks, Greg.
Sorry. I'm here to help.
Do you remember when we first started this, Greg said something, you might get the answers that you weren't looking for, and here we are getting the text?
I have a couple of comments I want to make if now's a good time to hop in on this. So first of all, Phyllis, I appreciate the comments that you made. One of the things that I was surprised as we embarked on this process is how expensive it is to do a survey. And so we were a little bit challenged in terms of finances. I guess a survey like this had been done a number of years ago by the site M&O contractor, and it was basically a Gallup poll, and it cost hundreds of thousands of dollars. And so we didn't have the finances, the resources to be able to do anything on that level, but we are really pleased with this company and the job that they did with what we were able to do. And we did get a number of bids, and we actually had to go back and ask for a little more money. So it was expensive undertaking, and I was surprised by that, but it wasn't cheap. The other thing that I wanted to talk about is in terms of how people get their information. You know, for those of us who grew up around Savannah Riverside, it's really not unbelievable to me that everybody does get their information from their friends and their family. You know, years ago, when I got hired on at the site in the early 90s, there were 25,000 people working out at the site. And it wasn't uncommon for everybody knew somebody that worked at the plant. And as we've downsized over the years, we don't have as many people working out there now. Fewer and fewer people do know somebody who works there. I was sharing with these guys, I was in Helen, Georgia over the weekend, and I went in this restaurant, and the owner came out and was just, oh, what brings you to town? And I said, I'm just off work for a few days. And he says, well, where do you work? And I said, well, I work for Department of Energy. Before I could say it, he said, you work at the bomb plant. So maybe if we'd ask people, what do you know about the bomb plant? Maybe a few more people, but no, I say that because there are a lot of people even that far away that know and understand. But I said, how do you know the bomb plant? And he said, oh, I went to University of Georgia. I have a lot of friends in the Augusta area and Waynesboro area. And so I've just known about it my whole life. And so it's interesting now, I think, that as we see that we have less employees, you know, and these younger generations don't really know somebody, you know, that works at the plant, when before there was a lot of that. The other thing is, where's the site located? You'd be surprised at how many think that the site is in Savannah. The Savannah River site, we get a lot of people who think that we're in Savannah, Georgia. So that wasn't really surprising to me either. And the other thing that I wanted to mention is the concern that we have over some of the facts that James mentioned about the younger generations, minorities, lower education, the people who have never even heard of the site. And so we want to make a more concerted effort to get out to those people. One of the things, and I hope I'm not stealing thunder or anything here, but one of the things the CAB is our mechanism to reach the public. And so we're going to make these meetings a little more broad, where we can take some time to maybe reach out. And one of the things we're doing, in fact, tomorrow night, since a lot of people aren't able to make it to these types of meetings during the day, we're going to hang around in this room tomorrow between 6 and 8,
And we're going to just host a drop-in for people who in the area that may want to come and learn more. We put these flyers out. We actually sent them out to some of the colleges and universities in the area. And so we're hopeful that that's one thing that we can do. You know, James mentioned the low-hanging fruit, like having people opt in to receive information from us, emails and that sort of thing. And so there are some things that we do want to go ahead and start doing and making some inroads where we can. So, and we do believe that the cab is a good place to start. So, because it's already, like I said, it's a mechanism we already have in place. We already have the room reserved. You know, why not use it and expand it a little bit? So,
Any other questions or comments from around the table?
I have two.
Yeah, Phyllis.
On this page, why do you include TV news as internet news? I'm trying to figure out why television isn't listed at all.
It wasn't listed on this particular page because I don't think that they yielded some statistically significant results out of it, but there are breakdowns for television.
Okay, and how about what DeAndre was asking about, you know, like an R&B TV radio station? It just lists
Yeah,
FM.
right, it just listed FM radio. That was how the survey company broke it out when they did the survey. Unfortunately, I don't have a deeper dive on that, and that would have been a great, you know, tack-on question on which station.
Right, yeah. And the other thing I might contribute is this differentiation between younger and older Gen Y. I can tell you, I have two 38-year-olds one of whom was in the process of hiring, and she had this has been about 6 years ago, but she had interviewed a kid who was still in college who was an intern. And she called me after talking to this girl and said, "I hate millennials." And I wanted to say, aren't you right in there?
Right.
But I didn't because she was so mad. But she, you know, I think that end of Gen Y really does not identify with the younger Gen
Yeah,
Y.
I mean, you
They're
could
very
absolutely be
different.
right about that, for sure. Anything else from around the table?
I was looking at that. I'm sorry, Greg. I was looking at that, and that's just the top 5.
Gotcha, okay.
Phyllis. So that's why the TV wasn't listed. Like he said, it wasn't statistically significant.
TV is less than some of these other things?
I know,
Seriously?
and that is interesting. And Greg was asking if we do get great TV coverage as well.
Yeah.
So
But,
we
you
just,
know, there's a lot of people now that are cutting the cord. I don't have cable at home. We have no
That is
television at all. Yeah, I mean, we have streaming services,
Right.
but I don't watch the local news.
And you don't get normal news
Right.
necessarily.
I check their websites.
Yeah.
But,
Yeah.
Greg,
Do you have the quantitative data on the questions about the concerns? Did they did they report how many people said I have no concern?
they do, yes. I don't have it. Let me take that back. I don't have a quantitative thing. I do have the raw data so that we could pull that ourselves and do those kind of counts and take a look at it.
I was going to say, if you want over the holiday break, my holiday break,
Yeah,
we can sit down and do some further analyses
that'd be cool.
on this.
Totally up for it.
Okay.
you guys are nerds. I'm just going to say, that's not what I want to do over my holiday break. But thanks.
You're welcome.
He brought the Federalist Papers to the meeting.
Yes.
Come on, y'all.
Just all 85. What else? Anything else from around the table? All right, thank you folks very much. Up next on our agenda, we have a short little break planned. I have 2:32. Why don't we come back at about 2:40? I'll probably give it a couple extra minutes. But stretch your legs, let's take care of our needs. 2:40, we'll come back after. Give or take.
happy to see you.
Well, I know as sponsors, so few people, everybody retires and goes on.
That's when we took about every back road in South Carolina.
There I was. Well, it's been once a week they do it. My husband
She will.
Nice to meet you. I've heard about all of you.
They do nothing. They know nothing, do nothing. They're no help.
I know. Well, either that or I'm so used to seeing
And he has a
people's
rare form.
pictures on there. I'm like, nobody's
So
gonna
there's, I
recognize me.
find
Congratulations. I'm still a part of Front Temporal Administration. If you need a Facebook group, and I think we'll get you in touch actually with my mother. My mother's not working.
that might, yes, I would love to talk to her.
I would be happy, she'd be happy to,
I'll tell you what, I've got a business, I have a card here. I finally found an online resource that has been very, very, very helpful. And,
it's very, I lived with them actually for a while to help her. I didn't think we'd do it. It's a large responsibility. I think we're exactly what you said. That's okay?
I would love, and if you will write, I tell you what, write her name on the back there for me.
Oh, hey, don't worry. Thank you.
So how old was he when he passed away?
We finally
Yes.
got the fish on the hook. We'll see if it's you know, I obviously, like I said, I went through that whole
Okay.
damn fatal polarity, and I know that had to drive you out of your mind.
Here are all these. Oh, let's do it.
It was the day after his 60th.
Oh my gosh, see, my husband's 79.
He was stubborn enough, he was gonna outlast. But he was the University of Tulsa also, respiratory pulmonology.
What can I help you with? I really think we should, but because that'll let people read them overnight. But let's double check with. I think he
You know,
has.
the polarity thing when you Yep. There's 1,000 buttons on this thing that you gotta optimize, but you paid the contractor to do it.
Would
did he lose the total ability to
Well,
speak?
Thomas Johnson was just kidding me. He said, I see you took care of the protest. By putting everybody on your team. And I said, you know, it's not really appropriate behavior. You see, you know, the contract got to be so big. And when you look at those three keys, 85% of the highlight waste credentials. So, you know, why not? But anyway, you know, and then
That's
I, you know, after I did with the boys, I went out and handled that damn jail protest about, you know, DOE official on that. Well, you know, he was always like,
See, my husband hasn't been able to say my name in about 3 years.
He can remember my mother's,
He knows who I am, but he doesn't know my name. Hasn't been able to say my name in 3 years.
I don't know, yeah, I don't know. I would love for you to talk to my mother.
I would love to talk with her. So where does she live?
North Augusta.
Okay, okay.
well, that's, you know,
Way,
Yeah, yeah. Oh, that would be wonderful. I would love to talk with her because, I don't know anyone personally. And I mean,
You know, there are several people actually from out there. It's kind of weird.
yeah. Well, and the really good news about this whole thing is, you know, if this thing goes according to plan,
really?
once and for all, it's not necessarily the official debt of the DOE Department of Liability.
Oh, interesting.
So with my dad, they think part of it, especially, he had a lot of concussions when he was younger.
Oh. Well, my husband did play football, but I know.
How's everything else going? Go to the gym
Oh, did you?
anymore?
So what did it show?
I don't know if it's part of like the novel thing. I don't know if it's but he tried to sign up for several
I kind of like that too, when I gradually started off.
like trials. But he ended up not meeting any of
That would be wonderful. I would really love to talk to someone that's been through this. I'm so glad you did.
I did the proposal
It's terrible.
They took care of the butt. That's a BS. It's all I guess, you know, that's what I is that it's expensive.
See, there's a Facebook group, but it is so depressing. So I was on it for a little while, and then I had to step away, and then I had gone back, and I did find one resource that was useful, but it is so, it's just almost too much to read it. You know?
Oh, hey. Folks, I'm going to give you about a 2-minute warning. I know we're already at 2:41, but we're going to come back without the feedback in about 2 minutes. This is your 2-minute warning.
He really self-diagnosed himself, just like your dad did. I really think is why he.
Really?
Because he started having,
You have 2 minutes to find your seat.
calling words, okay? So
I don't know.
he retired, and we retired here in Buffalo, and he went to, well, there's an organization here called Memory
I don't
Matters.
know.
And he went there.
I'm not
and
going to let y'all do that one.
and at the time,
I won't facilitate that one.
mild cognitive
There's a lot I'll do. That ain't it.
and the neurologist, he's been under the care of a neurologist for 7 years. But he's probably had this for 14 years. And I've probably been his voice
push the water unit and pave it.
I was just thinking about it. I gave him a 70th birthday party, and at that party, he would not have been able to stand up and say and call those people by name. That was 9 years ago. It's been a very long journey.
All right, folks, it's time. Let's bring it back in.
They're totally useless.
We got 3 extra minutes.
Totally useless. All they do is track the dominant spiral. That's all they do. And it's so pathetic, isn't it? Yes, I mean, how ridiculous is that? They have not come up with a new drug in 25 years. Yes.
All right.
Exactly.
As we find our seats and bring it back in, let's take a minute and talk about what we're doing next. So this next part, like we talked about, is going to be a series of brief updates, we'll see how brief, about all the site's activities from your last meeting, last in-person meeting, November 2019 to today. That's what we asked all these folks to do. Now, Mike Budney was going to tee up the conversation when he came in, but he also let us know that he was going to have to step out for a bit, and it looks like maybe we've hit that point. So we're going to keep trudging on. Anybody have any issues with that one? Probably not. So what I'm going to ask you to do, let's let everybody get through their presentations, and we'll do questions after each one. Does that sound fair? We'll let them get through their presentation. We'll do Q&A with that person. If we hit the end of all 3 and we've got some time left, maybe we can do a little bit more QA with all 3 once we're ready to go. So up first, we're going to let SRNS, Wyatt Clark has graciously agreed to come here today, talk to us a little bit about what they've been up to, what they've been working on, and yeah, Wyatt, you ready? Come on up.
Where would you like for me to stand?
Either in the middle or behind the podium.
Okay,
and then
good.
We have this forward, back.
Awesome. Thank you.
Yes, sir.
So good afternoon. My name's Wyatt Clark. I'm the Vice President of Environmental Management Operations, which encompasses a lot of the nuclear materials movements as well. So I'd like to give you a quick little summary of the significant items. If I went through all of them, I'd be here for quite a while to work through it. You know, I heard your comment earlier, Charles, about the importance of keeping it at the right level. And with the exception of a short commercial time frame and about 3 years I spent out at the Hanford site, I've been a SRS employee. We have a tendency of speaking in acronyms. And as my kids have told me, we knew how to text before texting was in vogue, LOL, right? So I will work to try to keep it at a reasonable level here. So the Savannah Riverside is really operated by a number of contracts, SRNS being the M&O provider. Our companies, Fluor, HII, and Honeywell, take this job as a very significant responsibility. In fact, our board of directors often meet, and it's really quarterly, with the leadership to talk about the successes and the path forward, and then they meet with the department partners to make sure that we're addressing any needs that come up. In fact, that's where Stuart McVean, my president, is today. He's meeting with that team. So unfortunately, you get second string, but I'll try to muddle through this. When you look at the significance of the Savannah River contracts as a whole, it is significant to the regional area. When you look, there's $2.3 billion of scope that's executed, and 2.6 of it has regional impact. In fact, if you looked at the procurements, 400 million are local. Certainly, something that would raise your eyebrows from a delivery viewpoint. Yeah. Savannah River Nuclear Solution deals with $1.7 billion worth of scope. And if you look at how that $1.7 billion are delivered, I'm proud to say almost $450 million is contracted to small businesses, women-owned companies, veteran-related companies, and hub zones. So that's a significant interaction in the community. You know, a little sidestep here, but it's worth noting. I was telling Amy afterwards, it does not surprise me that the data you went through earlier was so significantly tainted to word of mouth. Our company is so engaged in the community. You look at the United Way, you look at the Heart Fund, you look at Children's Place, you look at, and I could just keep going on. We're so engaged at that level and at the church level that the respect of the community is part of our business. So word of mouth does not surprise me, at least in the regional area. If you focus on that $1.7 billion, you quickly get to the realization that that's a large number, and yet we're so aggressively looking at how we can save money for the Department of Energy. $163 million worth of improvements or efficiencies were identified last year alone. And we saved the department more than $17 million in hard dollar cost savings. Hard dollar meaning we could take that money and buy more scope. So every day we're looking for ways to deliver more with what we get in terms of a budget. If you look at our mission, I thought I was advancing, and I'm not.
Sorry, I turned it off.
Okay, good. On, off. That's the first thing you should always check. So if you look at our mission areas, they don't surprise you. We're actively working environmental stewardship, and I'll touch on that as we go through it. We're working through the securing of nuclear materials. That's primarily in the areas of L and K, for those that are familiar. L is the spent fuel receipt facility, and K is where we secure plutonium. We're engaged in transforming nuclear materials, the downblend operation that Mike talked about earlier that you asked about the glove boxes on, as well as the Canyon operations. And we have a significant NNSA mission, which I won't talk about here, but it's worth noting. You know, our tritium mission, in fact, over the last year, tritium has actually produced record extractions in their operation. We have a significant effort ongoing in terms of the pit manufacturing facility, with CD1 being issued, technically reviewed, the finances reviewed, the risk reviewed, and then approved for progressing the pit manufacturing. Those are huge NSA missions, and they do in effect the M&O, since one of the things we do is all of the roads and commodes, handling all the infrastructure for the site. So we've got to make sure that any needs for those oncoming missions or expanding missions are addressed. And of course, all of what I covered today, we did under the challenges of COVID. In fact, all of my team have worked since day one on the site. Today, we have about a 24-25% telework strategy, where those activities that can be teleworked are. But as it relates to field execution and operation, our team is out there, and we've managed the COVID challenges appropriately. So let me talk a little bit about the environmental stewardship section of our business. Last year, we demolished 9 buildings in the area, about 25,000 square foot. Mike mentioned the Ford building, which was one of those. It got its name because it was where the Ford Motor Company's reactor parts were maintained and updated for the operating reactors. In fact, those control rod mechanisms and the heat exchangers were maintained in that facility. Obviously, we have no operating reactors, therefore we have no need for that facility. And today, there is a brand new 6-inch slab that covers the area, about 10,000 square foot. So it's one of 9 buildings that were addressed. If you're keeping track of the total number of buildings now, we have, since 2008, closed 15 buildings, demolished. And that really gives us about 1 million square foot of recovery. Significant effort from a moving away from the legacy of Cold War. This past year, we completed our 20th anniversary of phytoremediation. That's a nice big word for treating groundwater that is very slightly contaminated with tritium by using a natural process. Actually applying it to trees, allowing it to be absorbed, and then transported with no bio take-up of the trees, and it's a significantly effective method of dealing with low tritiated water. And in fact, if you take the water off the trees, within 2 years, they can be harvested. And that's the benefit of the system. 20 years. Of course, the ecology lab and SRNL played heavily in that process, and it has been studied extensively. If you look at the waste units that we've recovered, we're now at 412 of the 515. That gives us that magical 79%. That 515 is the number that was identified in the late 90s as the scope that needs to be addressed. So we're making great progress in terms of waste unit closure. I won't touch on 235 as it relates to deactivation and decommissioning because part of my team will be here to talk about that tomorrow, but I should highlight that we made great progress on the FH lab effort. SRNL aggressively moved the methods from that facility. That used to be the heart of the operating analytical service for the site. They moved it to A area, consolidated, and they're actually delivering us the resource or the activities at a reduced price. So that's a paid-for political announcement for you. What that's done is given us the ability to start decommissioning that facility. Last year we laid up 25 of the labs, and now we're moving into a zone-by-zone deactivation. So very smartly moving out to reduce that cost. And that's a significant savings that we can then apply to other work that we're doing. Finally, and I'll highlight this for the environmental team. Over the last 2 years since we've met, we received the Project Management, PMI, Project of the Year for what they did on the ash basin cleanup. That 90 acres of ash that was removed and cap installed was highlighted and recognized by the national organization because it took, it aggressively moved forward, it had innovative ideas, and at a top level, it's the way projects ought to be managed. When you get that kind of national recognition, it's always something that you want to raise your flag on. So our team has been aggressively moving as it relates to cleanup. Let's pivot to nuclear materials, and initially I'll talk to uranium, which is the focus of the Canyon and L area. We moved out on a number of innovations to increase the production and throughput of H Canyon. Last year, we delivered 11 batches of dissolution. That's an improvement over the historical about 6. So you can see a significant improvement in throughput. Our target is to get to 18 batches. And our goal is to get there by 23. Now, how are we doing that? A number of innovations. We've increased batch sizes within the dissolving system. We've reduced the the number of processing steps required. And candidly, we've been looking at ways to accelerate throughput at the same or slightly less staffing levels. So all of those are starting to play out very well, and you can see the first indications of that operation. As with anything, as we drive forward to improve productivity, we're concerned about the availability of the system. These are rather old facilities. They might fit into the boomer category earlier, right? So the importance of equipment availability cannot be overemphasized. And we've had engineering teams working on what needs to be addressed, how we need to address it, and rightly allocating funding as we go. We completed 2 very significant receipt campaigns since the last time we met. The first one was the target residue material, which came from Ontario, Canada. We received 115 shipments by truck of liquid HEU, 6,000 gallons, offloaded over 4 years, and we never delayed a shipment. It was a very positive effort. Once again, for SRNL, they assisted us with a lot of hands-off equipment to be able to make that work, and it worked very well. Dedicated team, well executed. The Canadians recognized that and properly said, hey, we appreciate the effort. The other was related to spent nuclear fuel receipts into L area. The TRM went directly to the canyon since it was liquid. The NRU, that's National Research Universal, and NRX, National Research Experimental Reactor Fuels, were brought into L area. That campaign started in the 2015 timeframe. We had to modify the facility because this fuel is taller and heavier than what we normally receive. We extended shielding systems. We improved our movement operations. And let's see, we started that campaign in the 2015 timeframe. We received about 300 bundles. And once again, I'm proud to say we had no interruptions to the shipments from Canada. Both of those receipts, both of those campaigns are now complete. We're done with those receipts, and we're now into the processing of the NRU NRX through the canyon. The L area facility, while I gave you an appreciation for one of the types, or 2 of the types of fuel, has continued to receive, as Mike said, the research fuel for both domestic and foreign. And last year, we got 17 receipts during the course of the year, all of them promptly handled in terms of schedule. We have a lot of focus on making sure that equipment is available and performs as expected so that we do not impact shipment schedules. In fact, I'd go as far as to say, if a shipment schedule got impacted over the last 2 years, it was the sender that impacted that schedule, which is the way we want to make that happen. So let me pivot. Oh, here, the previous slide had a circle on concurrent dissolutions. Last year we ran, as part of this exercise to increase production, we ran the 2 operating dissolvers at the same time. Now that's a big step, and it had not been done since before 2008. So we went back into that operation. And I can also tell you that we're in the process of installing a 3rd dissolver, which will be a electrolytic dissolver, and it will allow us to attack metals that are not aluminum-based, i.e. stainless. So what about the plutonium disposition, which has been a significant focus for us, as you would expect with the politics. In 20, we completed modifications to the existing glove box. And we did that in order to add increased capability and to put in an optimization process, optimize the material. That glove box was installed on an operating plutonium line that should raise increased concern with anybody that's dealt with plutonium. We did that spot on, no contamination, no issues relative to installation. Once installed, we started it back up on 2 shifts. So we moved from a 1 shift to a 2 shift operation. And then in 21, as Mike reported, we went from a 2 shift to a 4 shift operation. That shift, increase in shifts, was the completion of a multi-year training exercise to get us up to that level of staffing. Last year, we completed 55 downblends. What does that mean? That means we take a 9975 from the vault, we bring it in, open it, we bring out a standard 3013 container, which is a welded 3-unit container, goes in the glove box, it's opened, the material is adjusted with an additional product to make it whip ready, and then it's taken out and put into a CCO, another type drum, criticality container overpack for whip shipment. We did 55 of those. This year we're targeting 98, so you can see the uptick in our production rate. To address those CCOs and make sure that they can be moved off site, we built a CCO facility pad. That CCO pad will receive up to 4,000 containers. It allows us to X-ray, to assay, neutron assay, and package the containers for whip. The facility was completed in the spring. We put it into service this summer. We are working through certification through the multiple entities that have to certify this process, and we target shipment in the late spring, early summer. We will be sending plutonium out via this pathway at that time. There is about $100 million of improvements and upgrades ongoing in addition. With the movement of supplemental plutonium disposition into this area, we recognize the infrastructure necessary to support it. We're adding in 2 entry control facilities, which will help with the movement of material in and out. We're adding housing to house that kind of staffing. Certainly a 4 shift on 1 line that gets increased to 4 shift on 4 lines is a pretty significant staffing increase. And then we're also working the security elements associated with it. Now that's the high end. You've got, some asphalt pads, all of the other little things that would come in to associate with that. A lot of work. SRNL is working with us to even look at the use of a level of robotics to inspect and move around containers that would then be brought in to receive the material. So we're looking for yet other efficiencies that could save in this exercise. A lot of work going on in K area. Each one of those steps brings with it a significant amount of evaluation of safety basis, et cetera, so that we can do it as we've described any of these other initiatives. Let me talk a little bit about the supplemental plutonium disposition process, which gets a lot of airtime in the news. But according to that survey, a lot more probably word of mouth. And I'm okay with that too. So this extends our capability to 3 glove boxes, or to an additional 3. So it'll be 4 glove boxes. It improves the operation significantly. These glove boxes will be shielded. And anybody that has dealt with a neutron source knows that that's a pretty important attribute. They will be lined up to manage the material in a more ergonomic fashion. They include additional assay devices, and most importantly, there are certain elements that will be hands-off. When we started this process, we recognized it required more hands-on operation, and we look for opportunities to automate that or move hands-off so that it could be executed with our operators, hands in the glove box. The long lead procurements have been released, and they're in process, including glove box manufacturing. The project has a goal of 2026. The baseline is currently 2028. we've got to do some improvement there, and we're looking at opportunities. It's about a $600 million upgrade, so a big project. And with it, it will bring significant increase in staffing. So we're thinking ahead in terms of the staffing. So that kind of takes me to the future. Workforce is essential to deliver this. You know, I said that we worked through COVID to get what I've described done. We did that because we have a very creative, driven workforce that we've brought into our culture. As we bring in more people, that challenge continues. And candidly, as a boomer, from one of the previous slides, I'm excited to have the new eyes that are coming in because they provide us a different perspective. And quite candidly, it's in many cases, an efficient perspective. So it makes me happy. In 20, we started an apprentice program for operators. Our goal was to not just take our old process of hiring, bringing in and training, et cetera. Let's start an apprenticeship early and get them involved in the training. It was very successful. In fact, Stuart met with the governor of South Carolina this past year and expanded that. We now have 13 apprentices programs operating, and we have about 88 apprentices signed up. I can tell you that looking at my nuclear materials, we're looking at a couple apprentice classes starting in 22. So it is a successful process that allows us to engage people early, get them trained, and provide them work, and most importantly, give them a level of funding. So our goal is to reach out to other areas of the Savannah River Site rural area that have not been touched and continue to pull on them to help us in terms of the staffing that we're going to clearly need to be able to execute this goal. If you look at our hiring, it has been very robust. And in fact, I can tell you that we've had no impact meeting our needs. Last year, we hired 526 employees. We got significantly more in terms of applications. So it gave us the ability to triage down to the top candidates. What that's done for us is actually reduced the age on site. And right now, the average age within the Savannah River Site is 47. I can tell you 5 years ago, it was in the 50s. So it's continuing to tick down. We have a effective intern program. Last year, we had 126 interns working in and on the site. Now, a lot of that, because of COVID, required us to deal with teleworking with interns, which is a bit of a challenge. The positive side of that is that our interns really provide us a strong feeder towards the engineering ranks, and we're glad to have them. And then with the forces that are there, we're continuing to invest in mentoring and succession planning so that as we move people, or as people move, we have a ready individual to fill those needs. That takes a significant amount of investment from the leadership, but it's worth the investment, especially given the demand curve that's in front of us. So I'd summarize with this. We are aggressively working to deliver. We're looking for innovations. Those innovations increase production and reduce cost. We're factoring that reduced cost back in to deliver more scope. We have a good partnering relationship with the Department of Energy, and candidly, it is refreshing. You made the comment about the decision to meet in public. It is refreshing to have the department so interested in the innovations and driving the mission forward. Savannah River Nuclear Solution gets an opportunity to deliver on this contract for another few years, and we'll do that as we have in the past. Questions?
Questions from around the table? Charles, I see your card going up. We'll start with you, sir.
If I may, you mentioned the electrolytic dissolver in H. Canyon. Did I hear you that it has started up, or at this point it has not done anything?
No, we have cleared, so there was a failed dissolver in that area, previously an electrolytic dissolver. It has been removed. We have pulled the tankage out that's there. We're now moving tankage back in as well as the dissolver. We have support systems. That transformer is the biggest transformer you probably have seen. That'll be rolling in shortly. Our goal would then be to move it into startup testing. We'll probably do startup testing through the 2023 timeframe. We'll do some cold batches, and then we'll move into a campaign of working off the fast critical assembly FCA material that was brought here from Japan.
It also removes all the other waste that we've already got in Ale.
Yeah, so
That's never going to Idaho, and that's a political statement.
So I like the way you think. One of the alternatives that the department has, I told you they were being innovative, that they're considering is how we might be able to use the tools available to work stuff that won't go out of the state another path.
If I may, James, I've got 3 questions, and
Sure, why not?
Does he get paid by the questions?
they're all related. You said you had 2 operating dissolvers going at the same time. Now, I don't really understand. Is that one on there was a hot side and a cold side, or a hot side?
No, both of these dissolvers would be operating in the warm side, but typically what you do is, in the past, is you would charge one, operate the other. So you kind of get a sequence of in this case, we were using the crane to charge them both, and we brought them both online to operate. We went through a detailed review of ventilation systems, et cetera, but there'll be points, if you get to 18 batches, where you need to be running more than one dissolver at a time, and this was the first step towards that.
That's significant. It appears to me.
No, it is significant. I'll tell you, the production that we've delivered over the course of the last year increasing is significant. Some of the improvements we've put on the table that the department is evaluating, they are significant. They're all focused on really smartly moving towards getting material out of L area.
My final question, if I may. You mentioned that H Canyon, which to me is the essential operating piece of that site now. Concern about the budget, because this thing is old as I am, and that's getting pretty old. Are you having any concerns that the budget is not going to meet maintaining the level of efficiency in H Canyon that needs to be there?
You know,
it's the only thing we've got in this country, from what I understand.
Right, you said old. I look at you and I think of dependable, right? So, yeah.
I'm not insulted.
Yeah. So there are a number of systems that need additional attention. The department and our company have worked together to identify those and prioritize them and move forward. One of the positive initiatives DOE is looking at is the potential to actually reduce the number of systems we need, because that's been under evaluation, and there's the potential that we'll be able to reduce it. We went through a detailed infrastructure review across the site. It did not just include nuclear materials, it was the whole site. And we presented that flow up to headquarters. There's a lot of systems, not just in the canyon, that need attention. But I think our process of really assessing the risk and then applying the money to the risk has proven to be effective. We're continuing to do that. In fact, we've been able to do it and bring a system up and actually produce faster with with fewer people. So at this point, I would tell you it would be not informed of me to say we don't have an infrastructure challenge. It exists, but to date, the funding has addressed it. And I'll tell you that as far as the nuclear material operations in the canyon is concerned, we've actually projected that for 10 years. So we know what it's at, and we're trying to work. In some cases, it's better for us to manage that from a viewpoint of saving money, like the FH lab, that we could then reinvest into those infrastructures. So I'd like to think about it as a larger effort that says it's part our responsibility to save money and invest, and it's part our communication, and we're doing that routinely. So I'm going to tell you right now, I don't have one that keeps me up at night.
Thanks, Charles. Let's travel around to Greg.
Thank you. Thanks, Wyatt, for the nice presentation. You touched on this briefly, but I wanted to follow up on it because I was so struck by this. We had a briefing, I can't remember, 2 or 3 years ago, and at one point the comment was, if I'm remembering correctly, something more than 50% of the site was eligible for retirement. And that's still astounding to me. You did say the average age was down, but I wanted to follow up a little bit. Where are we in terms of the proportion of the site that's eligible for retirement? Have you been able to fill all your empty positions? And tell us, does the Great Resignation affect SRNS?
Yeah, so I'll answer that a couple ways. First off, I don't know the current percent that's retirement eligible. What I do know is that we just went through an exercise where a lot of people had an opportunity to touch the retirement button and leave as a part of this mandate, and they've chose to stay with us. Their 401ks are in much better shape as a result of the performance of the market for the years. But in many cases, they're like I am, where it's a privilege to work there. We are delivering for the country, and we're aggressively moving the mission forward. I don't know of any situation outside of a couple of boutique functionality. Fire protection is usually one that's difficult to get a hold of. Sometimes structural analysis is one that's hard to get a hold of. But as it relates to the operation of the plant, we've really not had a problem. And in fact, there is so far a pretty large population we can draw on. With us being flexible in areas like teleworking, where we use that to some extent, it's actually been a benefit to us because some of the younger workforce like to have a little bit of flexibility there. My answer as it relates to the plants, I'm responsible for running the plants. You can telework, but if I need you here, your car needs to be running. So we've kind of worked through that exercise. I don't know of a, I've heard gray tsunami. I mean, that was mentioned at one point. We are going to see retirements. But so far, what those retirements have brought is energetic green eyes into those roles. Our challenge is knowledge retention and making sure they get a chance to learn what a lot of us have learned through this exercise. And I don't want them to learn it by experience it. I want them to learn it in advance of an issue or problem. So I answered, I don't have the data. I can get that for you in terms of retirement eligibility. Yes, we are successful in filling. There are some boutique functional disciplines that are a problem. I'm not seeing a problem with staffing the plant. Now, SPD comes along and SRPPF at the same time. That will increase our demand, and we're already looking forward to that. We've started outsourcing a lot of design work as a result of some of those, so we've reached out to external entities to provide us assistance in design. That is a good practice. It's the practice Hanford's used for many years. And as it relates to our people, we're already standing up these apprenticeships. It's especially interesting, the applications we're getting now. In the past, if you were going to get hired by the company, have to go do or be expected to go complete a fundamentals evaluation before you're hired, that took a lot of people out of play because they needed income. The apprenticeship allows them to gain that knowledge while getting paid and engaging in the plant. I am so pumped on apprenticeships. It is such a good idea. And I think that's the reason we're getting the growth we're doing.
So in the end, you do not feel under undue pressure to make sure you're staffed up?
No. I would not, it is not an undue pressure. We do invest in it. It is something that we keep on our plate. And as part of this effort, we're also mentoring and bringing along the next level. So to me, it's part of the job, my hair is not on fire. What little hair I have is not on fire. Yeah.
Thank you, sir.
Okay.
Any other questions or comments from around the table?
Seeing none.
Thank you.
Wyatt, thank you so much. Okay, up next, we have Phil Breidenbach from SRR. He's going to be coming to us virtually today because he had some other engagements, not able to travel down. Phil, you ready? We'll get your presentation up shortly.
Awesome. While you're getting that, I'll just introduce myself. My name is Phil Breidenbach. I'm the president at Savannah River Remediation. I actually moved down to South Carolina in 1985. Spent over 20 years down here working at the Savannah River site, running some of the facilities that Wyatt just talked about. But I never worked on the tank farm or in the high-level waste systems. After 20 years, I ended up going out to Idaho. I worked on 2 projects in Idaho where I was responsible for tank closure and high-level waste and also spent fuel. And then after that, I ended up going to Idaho National Lab and then down to WIP. I was responsible for the restart of that facility, spent 3 years down there doing hard labor, getting that facility back up. When it was successful and we got that done, they asked me where we wanted to go next, and my wife and I decided we wanted to come back to Savannah River, back to South Carolina, back home, essentially. And so we came back down here. I was the chief engineer for a while, and then they asked me to backfill Tom Foster as the president and project manager, so that's what I'm doing today. So let me give you a little update on what we're all about. Let's go to the next slide, please. So if you go one more, I'll do this in order here. Go to slide 3. There you go. Our contract, we're like many of these other companies. We're an LLC, a limited liability company that's made up of 4 partners, which we call parent companies: Amentum, Bechtel, Jacobs, and DWXT. And then we have some significant subcontractors also that are part of our contract, and they're shown on the slide. Our job is to manage the high-level waste system, to eliminate radioactive liquid waste that was produced during the Cold War era from production of nuclear weapons. We started our contract in 2009, and right now our contract runs through the end of January 2022. So we're in the 13th year of an 8-year contract, and we've enjoyed every minute of it. DOE recently awarded the integrated mission completion contract, and we expect that we will be transitioning to that new company sometime early next year. They will be the successor, if you will, to SRR. We currently have a workforce of about 2,700 employees, including our subcontractors. Now let's go back to the slide 2. So I've been doing this for a long time, 35 years. I've done it on several different contracts, 3 different states. And I, like many people, have found if you start by focusing on a compelling mission, and our mission with SRR is to eliminate high-level waste, eliminate one of the most significant environmental hazards in the state of South Carolina. And we take that extremely seriously. We want to get that job done. Our job isn't to manage it, to look at it, to monitor it. Our job is to eliminate it, turn it into something safe. You also have to have a meaningful vision, and our vision has 4 parts. We want to safely improve about and worry about, and we will turn it into products that no one ever has to worry about it again. That will make the world a better place. We strive to be event-free, but we learn from mistakes. Events in the nuclear business are something you have to figure out how to avoid. Think about things like Fukushima, 3 Mile Island, Chernobyl. Those are the kind of events that companies and facilities don't survive. We can't have those. We have to operate in a way that we don't have those kind of big events. Yet, we're all humans, and we all make mistakes. I know I do. If you talk to the human error kind of people who study that, they tell you that people make on average 10 mistakes an hour. And my wife tells me that I make many more mistakes than I ever have. But on average, 10 an hour. We can't let those mistakes turn into big events, so that's our job. We would be proud of what we do and how we do it. Well, what we do is all about the mission. It's easy to be proud of that mission. What I can tell you is we also need to be proud of how we conduct that mission. How matters every bit as much as what. The ends don't justify the means in this business. You have to do it in a certain way, and if you don't, you will have those events. And so we care about how. And then this last piece of the vision is very important to me personally. I want every person, every SRR employee to come to work knowing that they're going to be valued and to go home feeling they accomplished something wonderful. You know, I think in the end, we're all the same that way. If we're going to spend our lives at something, 10 hours a day, 12 hours a day, sometimes more, doing something, we just want to make sure that when we get home at night and a daughter or a son or a significant other says, "What'd you do today?" that it was something meaningful that's worth our time. So that's what we're trying to create. That's our vision. We execute that vision with a clear set of values and expectations. The values are on the bottom of the page there, and they're written that way for a reason. You see, safety is the first word you see, and it's because it's so important in this industry. Under it, in the center of those values is integrity. Integrity supports all those values. If you don't have integrity, none of those values will work. Integrity means that we tell the truth all the time, even when it hurts, okay? So integrity is important to all of those values. On the left of integrity is teamwork, and on the right is ownership. Work in this business requires teamwork. Everything we do is complicated. I wish it wasn't, but it is. And nobody does anything by themselves. It always takes a team. And it takes tremendous ownership. I tell our people that we're looking for owners, not renters, okay? And what I mean by that is sometimes when I'm on a trip or working somewhere away from home, I'm in a rental unit, an apartment, I have a rental car. I don't remember the last time I washed my rental car, okay? I don't remember the last time when I was in an apartment that I was going to be in for a short period of time, and maybe I cleaned the wall on the way in. I don't remember the last time that I pulled out spackle and fixed the wall and painted it and made it right. But I do that when I own it, when it's mine. And we want all of our employees to own their part of our business. And then it all sits over the top of continuous improvement. Continuous improvement is the foundation of our foundation. We want to make something better every single day. Think about that. If 2,700 people that work for SRR, and every one of them makes something better every single day. I don't care if it's in their personal life, I don't care if it's at home, I don't care if it's at work. If they make something better every single day, think of how good we could be. Those are our values. And over on the right, we amplify on those values with a set of expectations under each value. Those expectations describe how we do the work, what the expectations are for every employee from starting with me. Those expectations are incredibly important. Now here's the trick. Every lousy company has posters like this. Every one of them. The trick is the really good companies figure how to make it more than a poster on the wall, more than words on a page. They figure out how to get these that's what we try to do every single day. We do that by incorporating these things into all of the processes that touch our people. And I think it's what builds our culture. Let's go to the next slide. Safety was a value, and I'm going to talk about it here. Record-setting worker safety. We've gone 11 billion safe hours without a missed day. That is a long time. That was achieved in 2018. We followed it up currently. We're at 8.4 million hours since our last lost workday case. Our construction workforce, which does heavy construction, has gone more than 34 million hours since their last lost workday case. 23 years without a lost workday case. I know these are big numbers, and they sometimes it's hard to really know what they mean. What it means is, let me put it into perspective. OSHA tracks what the safety record is for companies in our business, okay? And our record is 10 times better than the average company. Not than a bad company, than the average. We are an order of magnitude better, safer than the average company. What that means is if an average company injured 20 people, on our contract, we would only have 2. We would only have 2, and that's 2 too many. But the difference between average and exceptional and us is 18 injuries. That's 18 people that I know that will go home safe because we took the time to care. That's what record-setting, world-class safety means, and that's what we bring as part of this contract. We also have had to focus on COVID, just like everybody else. Nearly a third of our workers are still teleworking. We implemented a set of rigorous protections on site, including masking, hand covering, social distancing, washing, personal hygiene, all those kinds of things in order to try to fight back on this pandemic. Most recently, we have vaccines, and we have greater than 93% of the workforce is fully or partially vaccinated at this point. And we're proud that we've gotten to that point. And most importantly, while we've kept everyone safe, we've been able to continue to conduct our mission, our important mission of eliminating that environmental hazard. Let's go to the next slide. Here's kind of how our process works. First, during the Cold War, during the production years, as part of making nuclear materials, high-level waste, high-level radioactive waste was created. It's a liquid stream, and we created a lot of it over the decades that the site was in operation. Some 50 million gallons of it, and it was stored in carbon steel tanks. Each one is 1 million gallons, and they're underground tanks. And we all know that carbon steel tanks, hey, someday, I can tell you one thing for certain, someday carbon steel tanks will leak. Someday that will happen. And our job is to make sure that we get that high-level waste out of there before that happens. This waste ends up going through chemical processes in order to be dispositioned. So it starts by going through a primary separation process at the salt waste processing facility. And it breaks that stream into 2 streams. One stream has the majority of the radioactive material and the highly hazardous material. And that stream goes to our defense waste processing facility, where it's mixed with glass frit. It's heated up in a melter to 1100 degrees C. It forms a glass, and it becomes part of that glass matrix. It's poured into stainless steel canisters, and then it is stored in underground. It solidifies and is stored in underground in the glass waste storage buildings. And I am telling you, at that point, that material is safe. It is safe. You can pour acid over that glass, you can put it in water, you can do anything you want to, and it doesn't move. It stays exactly where we put it. The other stream coming out of the salt waste processing facility is the low-level waste. It's the less hazardous material, the less radioactive material. There we send it to our saltstone facility. We mix it with grout, essentially, turn it into a form of concrete, if you will, and end up putting it into what we call saltstone disposal units. Saltstone disposal units. That grout, which becomes part of it, it immobilizes that waste. So we've done testing on that also, and it's safe for 10,000 years. It won't go anywhere. It will be safe, and it's in its final resting spot inside those SDUs. No one ever has to think about it. No one ever has to touch it ever again. It's done. And so when we complete this process, we've taken a highly radioactive, hazardous liquid, and we've turned it into 2 safe solids. That's what we do. If you go to the next slide, our mission is really conducted in 4 major facilities, and each of those facilities is kind of shown as a gear in this diagram. And the thing about gears is, if you've got them all interconnected, if you stop any one, if you start rotating them, they all rotate. But if you stop any one of those gears, they all stop. And that's exactly what happens in our facilities. The only way for our facilities to be successful is if they all operate. If they don't all operate, then the whole system shuts down. It stops. So I'd like to talk about 2 of those gears. Go to the next slide, please. The first one I'll talk about is the salt waste processing facility. And the salt waste processing facility is actually not run by SRR. It's run by the Parsons Corporation. Parsons was responsible for designing, building, and starting up that facility. And they did a tremendous job. This is, I guess I'd say, in our business, it's all hard, but the hardest of the hard is designing, building, and starting up unique, one-of-a-kind nuclear facilities. And that's what they were able to do. They started operation on January 18 of 2021. What we did is we were able to make modifications to the rest of the facilities, the rest of the systems, to tie in to the Parsons plant. So we feed that plant out of our tank farm, and we take products from that plant to DWPF and to Saltstone. And those connections are incredibly important. And remember, all of those facilities have to work in order for any of them to work. So we've been able to feed Parsons and to take the products. We've actually transferred more than 2.4 million gallons of salt waste to SWPF since its startup. That's more salt waste than has ever been processed ever before in the history of the high-level waste program. In addition, we produced more than 5 million gallons of that saltstone grout, of saltstone. 5 million gallons. That's more than has ever been dispositioned in a single year. All because those gears are all turning and it's all working. And every day we produce more, it's a new record for this year. It's been a great year in the history of the high-level waste program. If we go to the next slide, you might wonder, well, where does all that 5 million gallons of waste go? Well, it goes into a saltstone disposal unit. And those are pictured on this slide. You can see different SDUs, saltstone disposal units, and they're numbered 6, 7, 8, 9. 6 is the one that's currently operating. It's where we put that 5 million gallons of saltstone. In fact, it's about 1/3 full at this point. These things are huge, okay? Huge. They're 340 feet across, okay? They're 45 feet tall. You could put a football stadium and a football field and a small stadium inside these vessels. And we build these vessels here on site. The first one that we built was SDU 6. It's in operation, and it's being filled as we speak. SDU 7, it is ready to be used. It's completely operational, and when SDU 6 is full, then we'll move to SDU 7. SDU 8, as you can see, it's in construction. It looks different than that today. This was actually probably maybe 1 to 2 months ago. It's completely enclosed, and it looks just like SDU 6 and 7 now. And SDU 9 behind, well, it's got walls going up now and all those columns that you see. So these are all being constructed as we speak, and they're all going to be needed in order for us to finish our mission. Go to the last slide. So just a few final thoughts, kind of to summarize. We focus on safely performing our mission, and we focus relentlessly on that. We believe that it's important, that we get this right, because we're trying to protect the public, we're trying to protect the environment, and then along the way, we have to protect our workers, and we do that by keeping them safe. We continue to work to be good stewards of the taxpayer money. We know that we're not spending our own dollars. We're spending yours. We're spending everybody's. And the best thing that we can do to be good stewards of the taxpayer's dollar is to accelerate our mission, to do it faster, to do it better. And that's what we're trying to do by setting all of these production records that I've talked about. We support education in our community and the stakeholders. We support student scholarships, teacher grants, the United Way. I'm very proud to tell you, we were on a 5-year decreasing trend in the amount of money that we gave to the United Way every year. When I started working on this a couple years ago, saying we got to turn this around, and last year, I put 5 executives on it and asked them to go ahead and figure out how to turn this around. We gotta get back to the way we were and start increasing the amount we're giving back to the community. We tried a lot of things, a lot of creative things, and I'm sad to say we failed miserably. We didn't move the needle a bit. This year we took a different tack. We created 2 new clubs. One is called our Winner's Circle, where we took people who were leadership givers and we set a challenge for them and said, hey, you've always given, we'd like you to give more. If you can give at this level, I'd like to go have dinner with you. And I was thinking, hey, I'm gonna get 10 or 20 people and I'll go have dinner with them, it'll be great. I just had a celebration with these people last week. There were 130 of them there, okay? We included also people, we want to carry on a legacy. I thought this was kind of, this level of support for the United Way was dying, I guess. It was atrophying. And so we decided, let's focus on our early career professionals. And so we created a couple of organizations for them at certain levels and invited them to the Winner's Circle also. And it worked. We ended up increasing our program by over $65,000. That's a 20% increase, and it took our level of giving back all the way to the level we were 5 years ago. It reversed that entire 5-year reduction trend in 1 year, and I'm very proud of the team and how they responded to that. We work at the pleasure of the stakeholders, of you people, of the people who live in the counties around our site. If you don't trust us to do it safely, we don't get to do it, period. And so we work every day to make sure that we earn your trust. And I want to thank you for your continued support. And now I'll open for questions.
All right. Any questions for? Wow, let's mute something. Any questions for Phil from around the table? No? Going once? Going twice? Phil, you must have done a great job. They don't have anything for you?
I'll pretend anyway.
Thank you very much.
Thank
We
you all.
appreciate you being here.
Appreciate it.
All right. We're not atrophying a little bit. We don't need to take a break. We can keep going. Let's keep going. Up next, we have Dr. Vahid Majidi with SRNL. And I'm really excited about this one because I don't think I've had a chance to see him present. So I'm forwards, backwards, laser. He's giving it up.
Oh, that's great. Well, good afternoon, everybody, and thank you for being a champion, hanging out with me late in the afternoon. I know we ran a little bit over, so what I'll try to do is that instead of beating my slides to death, I'm just going to give you an overview and really give you an opportunity to put me to task and ask me questions. Savannah River National Laboratory, for decades, have been a part of the site and has operated as a business unit under a bigger M&L. Last year, the Department of Energy decided that the laboratory has grown both from a scientific and technical expertise, as well as the programmatic expertise across the community. This is the Department of Energy Communities. Sufficiently enough that really merited spinning the laboratory off as an enduring capability at Savannah River site. So as we're focusing on a number of different missions on site, including EM and NNSA, regardless of the expansion of those two missions, the laboratory is always going to be a part and parcel element of an enduring capability at Savannah River site. So in order to do that, the department put out a call for proposal, and a number of bidders came forward. And ultimately, the team that won the proposal for management and operation of Savannah River National Laboratory is called BSRA, Battelle Savannah River Alliance, which is led by Battelle, and it's in partnership with Clemson, University of South Carolina, University of Georgia, Georgia Tech, and uniquely, it's the only M&O within the Department of Energy that has an HBCU as a partner in the M&O, which is South Carolina State University. So that organization is responsible for management and operation of Savannah River National Laboratory. Just to kind of give you a little bit of an overview, as we moved out from Savannah River Nuclear Solutions, the organization that remains roughly is about a $300 million regional impact organization. We spend about $300 million a year. About 30% of our employees are resident of Georgia, and 70% of our employees are resident of South Carolina. And we have a significant partnership with Fort Gordon, South Carolina National Guard, Citadel, Augusta University. I put Citadel and Augusta University to point out that even though there is a university partnership that runs the M&O, that doesn't limit us from our interactions with universities all around the country. And in fact, that's where the vast majority of our workforce comes from. And I'll show you some of that data a little bit later. The one element that we're embracing from Battelle family of national laboratories is the concept of simultaneous excellence. That any national laboratory that works for the Department of Energy must have within its DNA not only the excellence in science and technology to do that world-class science, but also has to have an eye on operational excellence, work safely, and do really challenging operations in a very efficient manner. But the third element is the excellence in community service. And for years, we have been engaged in our community. What this allows us to do is to bring some of the resources that the corporate brings to reach out to the community and actually work on issues that are really near and dear, not to the company, but to the employees of the laboratory. So for example, one of our favorite organizations at the laboratory is the Golden Harvest. It's a regional organization that feeds a lot of people. And that happens to be one of the popular organizations that the lab champions. And in fact, this year, the lab has been the largest contributor to the Golden Harvest amongst all large companies supporting it. Doesn't mean that we're not working with other organizations, heart associations, United Way. All of those are in our wheelhouse, but our employees determine which organization they really like to champion. So that's how we run those issues. The winning proposal by EM had the following 3 mission initiatives. One, we promised the department that we would provide risk-informed approach that achieves sustainable regulatory end state. Environmental management is one of the largest liabilities that the department has. Our goal is to identify effective, efficient means of remediations at the lowest cost possible. It doesn't mean that we don't want to spend money, we want to spend money efficiently to make sure that we can do as much remediations across the entire complex. Remember, the more money you can save per operations, it means the processes are going to go faster, and you have more time to focus and clean the entirety of the complex in a shorter period of time rather than longer. We still have a very strong pillar in our national security, and that is to enable NNSA success by supporting a robust weapons stockpile while reducing threat through advanced proliferation detection technologies. We support 2 sides of NNSA, NA-10, which is the weapons sides. We have a vested interest in the tritium processes and in the plutonium processes, and in NA-20, which is the non-proliferation activities. How do you stop foreign countries from developing nuclear programs outside of the agreements they have in an international domain? The third is science, engineering, and energy, which is to develop environmentally responsible and secure energy strategies through advanced engineering and material chemistry. This is really where a lot of our university partnership comes to help us, along with the 4th pillar, which I haven't shown here, and that's workforce development to deliver the intellectual resources needed to execute the vision for the nation. We're lucky we live in a region that we got very strong universities in South Carolina and Georgia, but also we can rely on North Carolina and Florida as feeder pool. It's often that I sit with my national laboratory colleagues and they talk about the difficulty in recruiting people and bringing them into the areas that they're in. And I am one of the few people that never complains, because on a typical job ad, we get a significant number of applicants, and I can tell you, even for some of our most sophisticated positions, some of the most complex operations, we typically end up with 10 highly qualified candidates and only being able to interview 3 or 4 to identify that really best candidate for that position. And I'll show you some of that data a little bit later. So our goal is that over the next decade, we're going to expand the core capabilities and competencies of the National Laboratory from our current 4 core competencies that I've shown in a little block to 7 core competencies to meet the future needs of the Department of Energy. It's really not important what's specifically in those boxes, but if you look at how the department has changed and some of the issues that they're tackling today, things like climate change, things like hydrogen economy, things like renewable energy. Well, those things have been sustainably working at the laboratory for many, many years, but not up and front. So what we're doing now is through these core competencies, bringing all of those up further in our priorities, because that's the priority of the current administration. But as the administrations come and go, we're always prepared to meet the needs and requirements of the new administrations. And that's what those 7 core competencies allow us to do. This is where our university partnership becomes really important, because we don't have the subject matter expertise to support all of those core competencies with our current staffing. So we rely on the university partnership to bring those subject matter expertise so we can go forward and expand those core competencies. And those core competencies are really cross-cutting across every mission area in the laboratory. So they're not specific to one particular program. So joint appointments are what we work with the universities so that we can have university faculty working on our behalf, not only at their own site, but at our site on some key issues that can benefit both us and that researcher. We have defined roles and responsibilities and creating an overarching framework that once we put that in place, all universities can follow the same thing. So rather than working with each university independently and trying to figure out what works best for them, the department is putting forward a framework for the Savannah River site so we can work with all of these universities under the same framework. That also involves defining subcontracting activities. How do we put money forward to the university? How do we get our folks to attend those universities or work at those universities, as well as the faculty coming to the site, along with the graduate students, postdoc, interns, and we're trying to expand all of those fronts. So partnership with the universities and industries within the region has already come to fruition. So for example, the department through eARPA program, or ARPA-E, had a funding opportunity call. And we partnered with the universities as well as the local industries. So I haven't named the industries because that all depends how the proposal goes forward. But we submitted just recently 8 proposals for these funding opportunities that included the South Carolina universities, Georgia universities, as well as the industry in the region. The immediate next big thing that's coming our way is the Advanced Manufacturing Collaborative. This has, the process has predated me. My predecessor was working on this project, and I'm glad that it's coming to fruition under my watch, Thomas's watch, Mike's watch, because we all have really worked over the past few years with the department and obtaining funding from the Congress to actually build a building. And I think I'm not out of line to say that sometimes the first quarter next calendar year, we're going to have, I think, a groundbreaking. Something around there. The idea here is that it's the building that's being put on University of South Carolina Aiken's campus that allows us to bring student, faculty, and industry all together under one roof without having to worry about key things like, can I get these guys behind the fence? What happens if they don't meet all the requirements and criteria that allows them to come to the site? How do I create new collaborations with unconventional workforce? So this allows us to bring new concepts to the Department of Energy without putting other things at risk that we normally don't want to. At the same time, because it's a university/industry collaboration center, we can try a lot of new ideas that normally we wouldn't want to be trying them in an operational scheme. So we can test things. You know, we get a number of great ideas. Also looking at expanding the concept of manufacturing. So it's no longer lathe and machines. We're talking about 3D, 4D, 5D printing, as well as biomanufacturing. How do you get biological material produced, the raw material that you need for whatever process that you need to go forward with? So for the 5-year strategic objectives, this is what we're planning to do over the next 5 years. Work with universities to leverage the core competencies for the laboratory. Importantly, focus to reduce costs for DOE remediation activities and monitoring activities. Facilitate NNSA plutonium effort and develop the next generation of tritium processing technologies. We are the subject matter experts when it comes to that. Establish efficient nuclear processing strategies. We talked about H-Canyon, and some worries that the H-Canyon is a very mature facilities. And if something happens to it, the country really loses nuclear processing capabilities. We are working with the department to actually work on that next stage. How do we focus our effort in having a nuclear processing capabilities beyond H-Canyon? Enhance scientific knowledge, mitigate the impact of climate change, with a focus on the climate change as it expands into the future. EM, NNSA, and DOE, by and large, have footprints across the country that may be impacted negatively with this climate. And how do we still preserve what we have done in those activities? Finally, strong community service engagement in South Carolina and Georgia and key CSRA partners. So over a 10-year period, if I look back, I want to make sure that the laboratory has done societally impactful science, discovery science, and advanced engineering initiative. You know, obviously my dream would be, we do a survey, it's no longer questions what is SRS. Can we recognize SRS and SRNL beyond the South Carolina and Georgia boundary, right? Does somebody in Colorado knows what kind of impactful science we do here, that it impacts their life on a daily basis? Leading champion for our environment and planet. As an EM laboratory, we are already a champion for environmental issues for the whole department. We're focusing on how do we reduce waste, how do we reduce the cost for remediating waste, but the same skills really apply to any environmental issues. How do we expand beyond nuclear waste and focus on the environment collectively? Advocate for advanced STEM educations and corner for our national security. As a laboratory that has worked on tritium for 7 decades and plutonium for the same amount of time, moving into plutonium pits is just a natural extension of what we've done in the past. Working with SRNS or the successor who is going to be working on production, the second site production of plutonium, or working with Los Alamos to enhance their capabilities to work on pit is something that comes very naturally to us. So I see really no daylight there. And finally, community engagement to support our youngest citizens and enable a better future for all. Somebody asked me, why is it the youngest citizens? You know, I told you, we really rely on our employees to tell us what areas they like to invest their community outreach. And youngest citizens seems to be what everybody is focusing at the laboratory. They like to do not only STEM outreach, but if we're doing any charitable work, how do you make sure that the kids are affected most? So just to tell you a little bit about our workforce, over the past 2 to 3 years, we have actually 400 new staff at the laboratory. That's 40% of our workforce. That is not, we didn't increase our numbers by 40%, we only increased our number by about 5%. That means there's a lot of retirement and attrition, predominantly through retirement. That has helped us reduce our average age from 51 years old to 45 years old, same as Wyatt mentioned. So that's a natural trend. We have increased our postdoc populations and the younger population from the regional universities. So if you look at the 18 CSRA counties, the red dots are roughly representative of where the local folks come from to the laboratory. These are the new hires from the region. But we don't hire just regionally, we hire nationally. So if you look at this map, over the past 3 years, we have brought in 100 new households per year from outside of the CSRA region. You know, South Carolina and Georgia included, these are the people that we actually had to move from extreme end of the states to the CSRA region. But more importantly, every red dot shows not just one, but those are the states that are predominantly our employees are coming from. Because we are hiring in advanced science and technology, there are great schools, there is DOE complex across the nation that we can really recruit from. And I just mentioned South Carolina is an attractive point for many of our employees that we recruit from other national laboratories or other DOE sites. So over the next 3 years, we anticipate another 300 attrition through retirement. And considering that we need to expand some of our base business capabilities, HR functions, because we are a new national laboratory, business functions, the legal setup, we need to bring in capabilities to advance those 7 core competencies. And including those 300 retired positions, we really expect to do another 450 hiring over the next 3 years to replace those retirements and then enhance those capabilities we don't have at the laboratory. So with that, I'd like to open the floor for questions, and I'll be happy to answer any questions you may have.
So is that That's a total 750?
No, it's a total of 450.
Okay, okay.
That's why I said 300 of them are retirement and 150 new
I'm just
positions.
making sure, because
No,
I thought I heard
no.
the other, and like, wow, that's a lot of people.
Yeah, that's not, yeah.
Any questions for around
It's
the
still,
table?
150 is still a lot of people.
It's still a lot of
Yeah,
people
that's
in
right.
3 years, for
Yeah.
sure. Jim, we'll start with you over there.
Just to help me understand the numbers, what's the total number of employees at the lab?
The 1,046 today.
All right, and
So it's,
turnover in the ads.
exactly.
And about how much of that are
Roughly about a third of our workforce is PhD. Okay, 2/3 of them, it's a broad spectrum, and, you know, I would say all of our recent hires over the past 3 years, they've had some college degrees, you know, associate degrees and above.
Thank you.
Sure.
Thanks, Jim. Any other questions around the table? Seeing none? Dr. Rashidi, thank you so much.
Thank you very much for your
today.
time.
Very much appreciated. Thank you. So any other questions before we move on to our next steps? Okay. You may notice we're a little bit past our public comment time. That's okay. We really don't have anybody signed up, but I'm going to ask if there's anybody in the audience who wants to make a public comment. We can make time. Going once, going twice. Sold. All right, so up next is going to be our chair's recommendations. Now, these are the products that are put together by the combined chairs meeting. So the chairs of the 8 cabs get together twice a year, produce documents that every board gets a chance to look at and vote on. This is our time to discuss it a little bit. Greg will be able to introduce each one, and we'll talk about them in turn. The first one up, Chair's Charge number 1, it's going to look like this. It's the only one that's got highlighting on the front cover. So if you've got that one in your hand, that's the right one. That's where we're going to start today. Now, one word of caution about these. These are different than your normal CAB recommendations. Recommendations that are made by just this board, we can edit until the cows come home. We can make all the changes in the world that we want to. These are straight up and down discussions because they've already been edited by the chairs. We don't get to edit them here. This is the document. So either after the end of the discussion, you support it, you don't support it. That's a decision that you get to make. But what we can't do is edit them, okay? All right. Greg, I'm going to let you get started on number 1 for us.
All righty, thank you, James. These, as James has mentioned, these are recommendations that have come from the National Chairs Meeting. I think Jim, when he sat in as the vice chair, we started talking about some of this stuff, and he had contributed to some of that discussion. As you know, as you've seen, there are 3 of them here. We've worked on all 3 of them. Numbers 1 and 2 were, I would say, I guess I would consider them, we found them challenging. They did, but we persevered and got through them and have given our input in terms of what the National Chairs Committee needed. As a result, we'll start with number 1. That committee came back with they had been asked for a white paper. It morphed into a recommendation that essentially has what I consider a lot of what would I call them? I don't want to use the term recommendations again. Hints, what are they? Sub-recommendations, I guess so. In essence, as you may recall from this charge, we were charged with ways of expanding outreach to the community. And remember, we went and we got our large list. I think it was 65, 70 outreach activities that we had done here at the site. We reduced it to our top 10. That top 10 was submitted to the national chairs. Each of the cabs did their same work effort on that. There was a committee that was put together that reviewed all of these recommendations, these sub-recommendations is what we're calling them, I guess, and put together what you see here, at least this is the main part of it, in the form of this recommendation. They laid out in the background the importance of outreach. They did their observations, and then they came, I guess the heart of this, as James has always told us, the heart is actually, of these things are always the actual recommendations. And the bottom of page 2 is where the recommendation part actually starts. Essentially what they did was they boiled all these individual recommendations down to this list of, actually at one point it had a different number of bullets on it, into 6 sort of broad ideas. And this is what they came up with. I say they, I was actually on the committee. I wasn't initially going to be on the committee, and then it seemed like they wanted my participation, so I went on ahead and participated. And essentially what this comes down to is some what I think of as very specific points of what we could do or what SRS could do in terms of public outreach. They're very specific. At one point, I asked some of our SRS colleagues, if you saw this, what would you, how would you feel about it? So the comment kind of came back, well, we really do most of this stuff or something very similar to most of this stuff. Anyhow, so I shared that with the committee. They took that in. I also then thought, well, if we're going to do this and if we're going to participate in this, maybe it seemed to me like it made more sense to do something more broadly philosophical in terms of approach. So what I will draw your attention to in general is stuff that I thought that might make sense for us here, that might be useful. And I will show you the number 3, the overarching one. Outreach should be a mechanism for effective two-way communication between DOE, EM, and the general public, and then it should seek to increase the general public's awareness and understanding of our activities, as well as get actionable feedback regarding past, current, and future activities. So that seemed like a useful addition. They did include that. And if you turn back to number 6, there are I guess the second and third sentences there. Again, broader ideas. Outreach efforts should be informed and motivated by relevant professional expertise and related quantitative and qualitative metrics. So in other words, let's use what we know scientifically and such to see if this can help. And then see if that helps. And then also to ensure ongoing process, have basically experts review what's done in terms of outreach periodically. So this seemed like reasonable additions to me. They generously incorporated them in part of this much broader document. Then I'll draw your attention to those last 3 attachments if you're interested in them. They basically listed all the things that all the other CABs have been doing that might generate ideas for us or for other CABs. What do I think of this? What should I say about this, James? I think
this is your opportunity to put your thumb on the scale. You get to do it.
Okay, so here's the deal. I think some of the things that I agree from what I've observed happens out at SRS. I think a lot of this stuff is done. I'm not sure it's terribly helpful to us. I think some of the broader recommendations that they incorporated are useful. If nothing else, it sends a message from us or the national chairs to the CABs in terms of a general philosophical approach to doing outreach. I will kind of leave it at that. I'm going to vote for this just simply because I don't think there's a reason necessarily to vote against it, because in the end, I'm not sure how much effect it overall has on us. I don't know if how Amy and her shop take the broad philosophical suggestions we have. For all I know, they may already do all this, but it may just simply reiterate some of the things they're doing. So I will leave it at that. I'm going to go on ahead and vote for it again for no other reason. I don't see a reason not to vote for it, and it may help us in the future at the national chairs meetings if we are cooperative. Is that a fair?
That's fair. That's
Okay.
fair. Any questions for Greg about this document? If you remember, I sent this out a few days ago. Hopefully you got a chance to read through it, take a look at it over the weekend. Any-
I can offer a
Jim?
comment, having seen or been part of some of the initial conversations.
Can I get you to use your microphone? Yeah.
The document, as I read it, really doesn't do any harm as far as SRSs. It does identify a couple of what I would consider to be relatively minor activities that could, that we could possibly benefit from. I think Greg's point is very appropriate that this is a difficult thing to put together when you've got so many different boards trying to take their view of the world and incorporate it into a common document. Therefore, I think, I'm going to vote in favor of this. I don't see any good reason not to vote that way.
All right. Thank you, Jim. Charles?
To formalize the process, and based on our chair's recommendation, I move for the adoption charge.
All right, we'll do our voting tomorrow. We'll do our voting tomorrow.
Yeah, but it's got to have a motion discussed.
No, we're not that formal.
Whatever.
We're discussing it now. This works. Any other questions about this?
Let me say one other thing about this. Whether we vote for this or not, I mean, I hope Amy and her folks will at least take a look at the documents and see if there's anything in there that makes sense and is useful to them. There's a lot of work. They did put a lot of work in it, so who knows what's in there that may be, something really valuable.
Yep. All right. Anything else, folks, before we move on? Questions, comments, concerns? All right, let's hit up the next one. The next one is going to have draft at the top and then start with 10-year strategic plan development. This was a suggested white paper on what the next 10 years should look like. What was this, Greg?
I was going to say, I wasn't nearly as involved with this one. I believe this is one of the charges that morphed over time, as I recall. And I was very informative listening to the discussion in that group because the different groups are at vastly different places in where they are. And so their approach to this was quite diverse. I think this comes down to a general issue. I don't know how much really this helps us here at SRS because we are, like, I guess, Hanford so far out into the future that I'm not sure how much this necessarily applies to us. But again, it may have useful information in it that is helpful overall. James, is that fair? I don't know what else really to say about this one.
That's fair. I think that's fair.
I'm planning on voting for this. Again, I don't see any reason to vote against it.
DeAndre?
Just a question, Greg. Thank you for your highlight. Is there any?
Yeah, thank you. Sorry, it's not so much for in the room. I know we're so close together and we can hear each other quite well, but we do have online attendees that, without the microphones, they hear nothing at all. So.
Thank you. My question is there any documentation that's already in place that's comparable, not that we have to go through it today, that you would highlight anything specifically that really truly stands out with this draft on this 10-year strategic plan?
I don't believe I do. Do we have anything? They didn't generate the documents with this one that we did with the first one, charge one.
No, they had asked for input up front. And
Yeah.
Then the charge morphed after this board
Yes.
generated that information, so.
So I'm sorry, DeAndre, I don't have any additional information to provide or to refer you to.
Thank you.
Anything else from around the table? Okay. The last one up for discussion today should look very, very familiar to everyone here. Greg, would you like to talk a little bit about this recommendation that we've talked about as a group a lot, and how it's changed from at the chairs meeting?
Sure. Okay. Thank you all for your work on this. I do believe, obviously, it was adopted by the National Chairs Group, and so we made a difference from what I can tell. This went before the group. It was it seemed to be a surprise to some of the folks. We pushed it kind of hard. I don't think they normally move that quickly on these recommendations, but I think that what the group was experiencing, I know at least I did not personally realize the difficulties that the other boards were having that were similar to ours. As a matter of fact, I thought ours were pretty significant. At one point, there was one board that literally had one official member because of this. So selling this one, I don't think was that hard. It got a little tricky at one point because there were some details in it, and quite frankly, what we did, we just took the details out. So this looks, as I recall, very much like what we passed. What was taken out, though, was, if you remember, we had put in a number that said if it dropped below something to the effect of 75%, then the site manager could appoint to get up to at least 75%. It looked like what that was going to end up doing was creating a big debate over whether the number should be 75% or whoever knows what else people would come up with. So, in essence, the number was dropped. What happened? So what this allows is the site manager to appoint when appropriate. They went through how many steps the actual approval process includes. What was it? I believe it was 23.
I think the slide that they showed us during the chairs meeting was around 20-something.
It was more than 20 different people to approve. And again, several of the boards had significant problems. Hanford mentioned that they had at least one meeting, if not more, where they couldn't get enough people because they couldn't get quorum because they did not have enough members to get quorum. So this was a significant issue. The only additional thing that I guess of note that I think we should also note is, in addition, each cab the cabs that want to provide some additional information, provide an impact statement. I guess ours is on the back of the sheet if you want to take a look at that. And what the reason behind that was Kelly Schneider, the person who deals with this at that level and will be pushing it through, thought it would be effective for the people she had to convince to be able to make this change, to show the impacts it was actually having on each cab. So we wrote one up, and I'm assuming, I guess the other cabs did. I have not seen any of that. I do know the last I checked on this, Idaho had passed this. Have you heard of any of the other cabs that have done it?
I believe one other board did. None others have met since then. I'm struggling to remember what the other one was. I had the data for you.
Okay, that's fine. It does appear that people are favorable to this. Some of the debates was a little of the technical stuff, but I think people were I want to choose my words carefully. I think people were in a situation that they felt like something needed to be done. And this was not going to hurt anything, again, so worst case, this could help, and best case, it could make a huge difference. So I think that was the general attitude towards this. Again, I will say I obviously am going to support this one. I think it'll make a difference. Maybe not for us. Maybe they're going to fix this process, and we won't end up needing it for us. It could make a big difference, though, for us or some of the other cabs. I'll be supporting it for that reason.
Gosh, I hope so. Any questions, comments, concerns about this one? Anything that we need to discuss related to this recommendation? Any questions about the discussion process? Hearing none, seeing no hands. All right. We'll be talking about these a little bit more tomorrow and having a vote on these and whether or not we're going to approve them. Last but not least, Heather, do you happen to have an envelope or one of those folders? Yeah, why don't you grab one of those? We have an election to contend with. I want to make sure that there's nothing else on my agenda I'm skipping. All right. So when I pass around a ballot to everybody, I'm going to ask you to go ahead and mark it, fold it in half for me, and I'll get something to slip these into. And then Amy, I'm going to ask you to join Delisa, and you two can count them together, so we do not have an A&O chair currently.
You can suspend. Well,
That will. Thank you very much. I'll ask you to slide it in there if you don't mind, sir. Oh, thank you. Thank you, sir.
Did you want this?
We take them in all shapes. It's all right. Can you cut me off for just a second? Thank you. We turn it back up. While they're counting all 5 ballots, I know it might take a little while. Is there anything else that we need to discuss today so that we know that we're successful in our meeting? You know, maybe you came in today with an idea of something that you wanted to hear, something that you wanted to say, something that you were hoping to have happened. If there's anything on that list that we didn't get to, let's raise that now. Is there anything that we need to cover today, sir, folks? Jim, what you got for us?
There's obviously been a fair amount of confusion to who are board members and when they became board members, et cetera. Can you just give me a quick rundown as to where we are?
With the remaining board members, you mean?
And going into the next board and so on and so forth. We have a board right now of 6, so.
We have a board of 6, and all of your terms are set to expire at the end of January. So that puts us in a really interesting position. However, we have every reason to believe that our package is going to be approved in a very timely manner. In fact, we just got an update today that lets us know that things are progressing, not just on schedule, but actually slightly ahead of schedule. So we have every reason to believe.
James.
What?
I said, don't jinx us.
Find some wood I can knock on maybe. But we have every reason to believe that everything's going to be approved on time, and we will open up next year in February 1 with a full 25-member board. That is our expectation. It'll make it a little bit awkward because everybody will be on the same renewal schedule for a little while, but the natural flow of things will correct that over time.
May I add something to that, too?
Absolutely.
I had been thinking a little bit about this, and I think one of our big tasks is to make sure that the new folks who come in are oriented so that they can hit the ground running as much as possible. As James has mentioned to me just very recently, the committees the committees, the chairs of the committees, their vice chairs, and the committees themselves are the workhorse of the CAB in terms of processing information and writing recommendations and that sort of, and just what we do at the CAB. And I think a lot of the sort of orientation of the new members is going to come through the committees. And I'll do, if I'm in that position to facilitate any of that, I would certainly push on that the best I can. But the chairs and the vice chairs and the committees themselves are going to play a real important role in getting people up to speed, getting them integrated, and getting them familiar with what the culture of the CAB is, as well as the topics that we deal with. And I think that's going to be real important in terms of the productivity of the CAB with so many new members. You told me it once, but I've forgotten. I'm thinking, is it 12 new members we're going to have?
See, that's where I like to draw a little bit of a line because, yes, we're going to have a whole bunch of new members, but our renewals haven't met in person since
Yeah.
November 19th. They haven't been able to be at the table for quite a while now at all, not even virtually. So if we don't treat them as new members as well, I think we'll be doing them a disservice.
That's true.
So I really don't look at it as 12, I look at it as 19.
Oh, good. Okay.
Wow, I just committed to a lot, didn't
Yes, you did. I was trying to put it all on the committees, but now, James, with 19 of them, you're going to have to help a lot.
Yeah, I mean, we'll have to really ramp up some stuff for sure. Congratulations, Greg. You will remain our chair.
Thank you. I'm honored. Thank you.
And congratulations to Charles. You will be the new vice chair, so you will be helping out at the chairs.
Congratulations,
Thank you.
Charles.
All right, I'm going to ask one more time for around the table. Is there anything else that we need to address today so that we can make sure that we're successful and we can recess until tomorrow morning? Hearing none. Greg, you want to gavel us out for a little
I
while?
will. I will see everybody tomorrow morning, 9 o'clock here. 9 o'clock, right?
9 a.m.
9 a.m. See you tomorrow. Have a good evening.
Good evening, folks.
Yes, sir.
We never put you in the front shot.
She mentioned. Christina, it's lovely to meet you. It's lovely to see you in person finally after a year on board. You're
Yeah.
person here.